preservation. Let's put our hands together for Dr. Mani as he's coming.
Good morning. Are we together? So let me first of all recognize honorable ministers, Mangaliso Ndlovu, and Professor Muriel has just left. I don't see them, but I thought I saw the Honorable Deputy Minister of Finance, Economic Development and Investment Promotion. Esteemed ambassadors and development partners here present, all protocols observed. I have a simple task of just outlining what the policy, monetary policy environment looks like and where we are going. Let me begin by saying that the monetary policy measures introduced on the 27th of September 2024, which included increasing statutory reserves and policy rates, coupled with increased flexibility on the foreign currency market, have resulted in relative stability in prices and on the exchange rate. The exchange rate premium has reduced from something like 150% on September the 26th to about 40% in October and November. The monthly inflation rate, which ranged between minus 0.3% and 1% from April to August this year, rose to 37.2% in October, but has started declining. For November it was 11.7%, and that rate is still being experienced as we speak. My expectation and the Reserve Bank's expectation is that inflation will continue to moderate going into the new year. The tight monetary conditions have resulted in a liquidity squeeze, but greatly reduced lending, resulting in the pressure on goods, on the prices of goods and services, moderating in order to meet the supply that's in the market. What we've seen is a situation where liquidity is greatly reduced. So what are the recent monetary developments that we have seen? So we've seen increased use of local currency, reduced and contained money supply growth, low and generally stable inflation, and an accumulation of foreign assets or foreign reserves. Now, the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe is committed to continue to sustain the optimal supply. Sorry, I think I've gone too far. Okay. Sorry. Can I have some help with this? It doesn't. So I was talking about money supply. So, and I was saying that the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe is committed to sustaining the optimal money supply management measures that resulted in a significant decline in the growth money. Now, why is growth money important? I think these slides are mixed up for some reason. This is the slide I was looking for. The growth is envisaged to further decline, reflecting the impact of the tight monetary policy that I was talking about. As you can see, we have seen a fall in the month-on-month growth, but also a containment of the M3 component of money supply. Yeah, this slide is so let's flip on to reserve money. The Reserve Bank is targeting a local currency reserve money component of not more than $4 billion, 4 billion by the end of the month. But what we've seen is that as of 8th of November, our reserve money amounted to only 3.4 million. So we are on course to end the year below the $4 billion mark. But I wanted you to concentrate on the graph on your right-hand side. As you can see, there are two things happening here. The Reserve Bank remains committed to always have full coverage. And we've seen, if you look at the green line, that we have completely attained that. In fact, we have more than surpassed the coverage of the available foreign reserves held by the Reserve Bank. So, what about what was raised by Dr. Pintivich? The weekly, the ZIG loans and the deposits in our economy. We have seen that there's been a reduction, a drastic reduction in the number and amount of ZIG loans and advances, and that growth itself has also slowed down. However, that percentage growth remains positive. This reflects the squeeze in liquidity in the market, with weekly growth of ZIG loans and deposits moderating significantly. And of course, these weekly growth numbers are all around between 1.1 and 1.4 thereabouts. Again, the story is the same with our ZIG deposits. They have fallen to close to 0.3%. However, these continue to fluctuate widely given the conditions in the market. In terms of interest rates, I can say with confidence that the banks have been offering affordable lending, both in local currency and foreign currency, to support productive activities in the economy. Why do I say so? When you have what we had previously was an exponential growth in loans and advances that was not sustainable. And therefore, like all central banks, one of the key instruments that you use is interest rates. Yes, they could be higher than what you find in the region and elsewhere. But then again, given the movement in our monetary aggregates, you would have to optimize the level of the instrument versus what is attaining in the market. Now, in terms of private sector growth, most of the credit is going to households, but agriculture and manufacturing are taking the bulk of private sector credit, with mining tailing in fourth place. So the productive sectors of the economy are benefiting from credit to finance expenditures, working capital, inventory build-up, and fixed capital investments. Continued access to credit is a key parameter to underwrite the country's growth, without which we will see the numbers that Dr. Pindin provided further going down. In terms of foreign currency receipts and generation to support exchange rate stability, what we've seen is that the country has remained robust, as indicated by a 17.9% increase in foreign currency receipts for the first 9 months of the year. And this increase in receipts is largely attributed to export receipts and, of course, the diaspora remittances. But what you notice is that what this does is to strengthen our balance of payments position and the current account of the country. In terms of the exchange rate, following the adjustment in the exchange rate on the 27th of September, the ZiG to US dollar exchange rate has remained stable, ranging from about 24.3 to ZiG 27.01. That's the range in which placements on the willing buyer, willing seller are being taken up and are being proposed. However, I want to propose here to say that the deepening of the foreign currency market is an essential component as the country goes forward. We need to look at ways of further deepening the willing buyer, willing seller market in order to enhance price discovery, but also to signal to business which way the economy is going. The ZiG exchange rate remains market determined and fluctuates through the price discovery mechanism of the willing buyer, willing seller market. But I want to convince, if I can, by a mere statement, to say that the role of the Reserve Bank remains that of trying to mitigate variability in the exchange rate through timely interventions. But the market itself determines what rate that change happens in that market. Why is this important? It is important for various reasons, but where it really hits the mark is to try and value economic agents' output appropriately. So any competitiveness will be determined by whether or not the economic agents can properly value the output and, of course, the inputs that they need. So the exchange rate mechanism is moving to a free-floating exchange rate as we speak. Now, the other element that I wanted to point out is that the exchange rate adjustment has had a significant liquidity absorbing impact, evidenced by a further tightening of liquidity conditions in the money market. And this will continue. And for some of you who've already gone through the MPC statement that was issued yesterday, you will realize that the this tightness in the market is envisaged to continue. So what about inflation? I've given you the numbers before, and I want to reiterate the fact that the stability that we have seen depends on whether the exchange rate mechanism, because of the exchange rate pass-through, the exchange rate mechanism is real. Now, exchange rate depreciation on the interbank market in late September was one of the issues that was raised in the report. But what I want to emphasize is that all market economies will have fluctuations in the exchange rate. What business needs, and I'm glad it was pointed out, is that that fluctuation is not wild, that those movements are not sudden, and that going forward, it is predictability of where it is likely to go, given the movement in the economic fundamentals. Now, I've talked about inflation moderating in November and going into the new year. The Reserve Bank expects inflation to go into single digits, getting into the month of January. If it doesn't do so in this month of December. Given all this, the meeting of the MPC of the 3rd of December maintained the bank policy rate at 35% and maintained current statutory reserve requirements, sorry for bankers, of savings and time deposits for both local and foreign currency at 15%. And for the demand and call deposits for both local and foreign currency deposits at 30%. MPC also resolved to continue deepening and improving the efficiency of the price discovery mechanism that I talked about. The fourth element there is new in the MPC, which is an introduction of a targeted finance facility for productive sectors. I can hear somebody shout QFOs. This is not, and I want to repeat, this is not going to be a quasi-fiscal operation. Honorable Minister, we're not taking your job. Fiscal operations are for fiscal authorities. The Reserve Bank deals with only monetary issues. However, we work very closely. So how? Because of the need to keep away from quasi-fiscal operations, what the Reserve Bank has done is to channel these funds through the Financial Services Center. So those activities will not happen again. Now we expect that going into the new year, given the gazetting of the finance bill in October, that the payments of QPDs for corporate tax on a 50-50 basis between the US dollar and ZIG will go a long way in increasing the willingness of economic players to surrender their foreign currency on the interbank market in order to get the ZIG that they will need to pay their QPDs. So what is the outlook like? In the outlook period, the exchange rate is expected to remain stable and inflation to continue to dissipate. In 2025, month-on-month inflation is expected to be steady throughout. And as I mentioned earlier, we expect it to enter into the single digits range starting this month. Going forward, the Reserve Bank is committed to ensure macroeconomic stability and to keep the direction in which we have embarked since April the 5th. How? By prudently working with fiscal authorities to manage through the Liquidity Management Committee with no recourse to the central bank. I can confirm that this has not happened since that commitment was made. So we envisage, as the central bank, continued tight monetary policy framework to continue to ensure the anchoring of inflation expectations. Third, the gradual market-driven de-dollarization process aimed at supporting increased and wider use of the domestic currency is also envisaged to continue. Fourth, what I've just mentioned now, that the government continues to increase the scope for the exclusive use of the local currency in the settlement of services and taxes through QBDs, through fees, through charges, and other government services. And we hope that the continued expansion of the range of activity that can be settled in ZIG will continue to rise. It is at least at this point that I state what I have always stated, that ZIG is our currency. That the future of this country depends on the future of ZIG. There is absolute commitment to maintain, to grow, to develop, and to support the use of our own currency. The economists in the room will tell you that without that, our economy will always have a glass ceiling, and we will never grow the way in which all of us want to grow in order to leapfrog the development divide. Fifth, the continued use of market-determined floating exchange rates to ensure continued proper price discovery in the foreign currency market will continue to be a target for the central bank. So there are two more efforts that I want to include in policy imperatives for macroeconomic stability. We know that there is a lot of discussion around the change or the variability in our climate. So efforts to initiate and grow a robust green economy will be a big target for monetary authorities going forward. This includes, but not exclusively, such instruments as green bonds to support the development of our country. In light of the tight liquidity conditions, MPC introduced the targeted financial facility that I have mentioned. But I wanted, in my concluding remarks, to say that the mechanism in which this targeted facility will be operated will have no bearing on money creation. I thank you.
Thank you. Big round of applause for Dr. Maffei. Oh, you can do better than that, ladies and gentlemen. A big round of applause. Right, good afternoon, everyone. Right, let me do it again. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. session. Now, unfortunately, His Excellency from Rwanda, Ambassador Musoni, will have to leave soon. But Dr. Matthew, that was an incredible, optimistic presentation. I was wondering whether, anyway, we'll interrogate your report, shall we? Because it was really positive. Did you agree with everything that the Reserve Bank was saying? Free floating exchange rates, great out there, loans are going up, you guys are getting access to finance, yeah, exchange, parallel rates, official rates, doesn't matter, yeah. Just ask you a question, anyway, for discussion. But anyway, let's talk about why we are here today, which of course is the launch of the 2024 State of Industry and Commerce Survey results. And today I'd like to focus on the results element of it. I think when you go through your report, you'll see all the information, all the graphs, all the data which is collected. I think let's give ZNCC another round of applause, please. It's such a great survey being done. So, we'll open it up. Let me start with Ambassador Musoni, because I know you have to leave first, sir. So, a few comments, just your views. I'm sure you've seen the report. Your views on some of the issues raised there, particularly looking at trade, particularly looking at the African Continental Free Trade Area, ease of doing business. I know Rwanda, if I recall, we were down to 6 hours, if I'm not mistaken, once upon a time. We're down to 2 weeks, if I'm not mistaken. So, maybe just a few words from you, sir.
Thank you so much, Director. Honorable Ministers, dear President of the ZNCC and the entire leadership, colleagues here present, ladies and gentlemen. Let me start by apologizing. I have delegation from Rwanda that will be leaving, going to the airport shortly, and I have to accompany them. So that's why I have to rush. But I would have loved to keep with you in this discussion. Let me start by congratulating the ZNCC for this wonderful survey report. I've gone through it. It's well done, very elaborate, and with very clear recommendations. So, if you look at the state of industry and commerce here in Zimbabwe, it comes up with, it presents some challenges, but also it presents opportunities for business sector to take advantage of. Like what the Honorable Minister of the Industry and Commerce said, in the infrastructure sector, in the power sector, electricity, those challenges also present opportunities of investment. But I know other panelists will have a lot to say. My take on this is just two things. One, if there are quick wins here, there are quick wins here to turn around the situation and have the environment much better than it is today. If we can work on red tapes and bureaucracies, these red tapes are easy to fix. They don't require a lot of budget like it is with infrastructure. It's about systems, processes, procedures. These ones can be fixed in a short time and can impact significantly on doing the business environment here. The second point which Reserve Bank has talked about is on the macroeconomic side. If we can have the monetary policy and exchange rate fixed as much as we can. I know there are challenges, but given the presentation we just had, I think it's doable. So my recommendation here is that if we can identify those recommendations in this survey that are quick wins, we start with them, fix them as we mobilize enough resources to do the rest. So I think 2025 to me looks very optimistic. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Big round of applause for Ambassador. Sorry. Ambassador, I think we can let you go. Please give him another round of applause. Thank you so much. But I think what is important here, as the Ambassador said, that it is about challenges and opportunities in whatever environment you find yourself in, which is exactly what this report is doing. It's giving fact-based evidence so that policymakers can make relevant decisions based on what the report is saying on the ground. Deputy Minister, welcome. It's nice to see you, sir. So some of the recommendations in the report, of course, the major issue from all recipients, there were three major issues that they had. The first, of course, was exchange rate distortions, low demand for goods and services, and of course, the big one, power. Without power, we cannot drive our economic growth. It doesn't matter what we want to do. We can't even drive our SDG processes. We can't drive our climate and so forth. There's that issue as Deputy Minister you could speak to, as well as, of course, the issue of, which I know that I know it's always there, the removal of the IMMT, which I'm not sure will happen anytime soon, but anyway, it's always there, so it's always there. And also, of course, reducing of the tax rate from 24 to 22%. I think one of the issues that baffles me is that the question is, who is increasing money supply in the market? Why is money supply growing in the market? Who's doing it? Yet who is actually paying for that? Well, I suppose businesses. Why? Stat reserves are up, which means lending costs are up. Yeah? You may not be able to access finance because you require more security. Access to finance is tough. So in a way, is the money supply growth being actually felt by business, as well as, of course, the government trying to raise additional revenues through various sources, which again is taxing the informal, not taxing the informal. How do we get the informal in? Because it's creating formal business moving to informality. There's a lot there, Deputy Minister, but here you go.
Thanks, Sandy, for being mischievous. The budget has been pronounced. I think you already know the views of the Minister on some of the items that you've just described. So maybe I won't go into that. But maybe I'll start from where you finished, because I think it's quite important that we have a few housekeeping issues with the survey, so that we are arguing or debating or critiquing the same place. And it's just important for posterity. Zimstat has formality, I think, at 42%, and our survey is at 72%. Both very bad figures, if I must say, but it would be good to find out what matrix is being used, so that one is then able, in formulated solutions, come up with the right areas. The Minister of Industries, want to know if anybody's being excluded or included. We should not be included. And then speaking on exchange rates, which is something that featured prominently in the survey, particularly on the comments around the drop in capacity utilization. I noticed that it was mainly those who are participating in local currency denominated firms, and also in the PCI index, those with a low business confidence index seem to be the same category as those that had a drop in capacity utilization, which is all pointing to an exchange rate issue, which I think the governor addressed in his maybe not. If not the governor, then maybe Prof. Wira addressed it in his initial presentation. As we gathered here as the Zimbabwe National Chamber of Commerce of Industry present, the real basis of the strength of our currencies will come from production. It doesn't matter if your currency is Mantoa, for example. The pictorial graph that Professor Wira gave us, where you've got the bigger arrow going out and the smaller arrow coming in, is going to determine the strength and breadth of our exchange rate and of our currency. What the governor and what the Reserve Bank is trying to do is just make sure that there's adequate foreign currency to cover the ZiG or the local currency that is there. Now, the mechanics of the interchange or the fungibility in between, I think our observation is that it has been Not so much of a streamlined process, because you don't want to let it run and be determined by fundamentals that might not be true. So let me not go too much into that unless later on from the audience someone really probes and pushes for that. Power. You notice I came a bit late. We're actually having a meeting with the Minister of Energy, CESA, Finance, and TAPA, interrogating why, when we have a cost-reflective tariff, should we continue to have power shortages? Where are the inefficiencies? How much power we're importing, how much is that costing us, how much are we generating the power, over and above the tariff that we have, how much is left. So I think a lot is being done to streamline and make sure that we have efficiency in what we have. But what government has done is to encourage the IPPs through the provision of cost-reflective tariff. Minister of Finance has also guaranteed fungibility, its convertibility of currency. Whether you receive your collections in ZiG, you're then able to get the necessary foreign currency to remit for that. And there's also a government implementation agreement, which gives a government guarantee to these IPPs. So I think those three measures being put into place will make sure that power will be available. Those private investors who want to come in and have the added support of government. But naturally, that's a mid-term to long-term solution. You don't wake up and there's a power station available. So that means in the meantime, one has to be able to make sure that from what we're collecting, what we're using, we are as efficient as possible, and make sure that this load shedding crisis that we have is reduced to a bare minimum and is reflective of what the clients are actually paying. I'm not sure, did I leave anything out, Danny? I know I skated around some of your questions, especially around the exchange rate and some of the taxes. But like I said, the budget is pronounced, so can't really go to that.
Thank you. Give him a round of applause, please. And he said he did explain why, which is good. Right, Ambassador, let me come to you, man. And of course, Ambassador first and dead. Is that right? From Turkey. Ambassador, you've seen the report, and I'm sure that your country is very much interested in increasing trade links, trade ties. Obviously, Turkish companies coming to look and invest here in Zimbabwe, looking at the climate and the environment, the ease of doing business, all the things that were covered in one of the issues that was covered in the report. So maybe your comments on the report itself and what you perceive as as the positives, the opportunities, the challenges that you see in the report vis-a-vis trade, vis-a-vis business in Zimbabwe.
Thank you very much. Honorable ministers, senior government officials, ZNCC leadership, my colleagues, good afternoon to you all. First of all, I would like to thank ZNCC for inviting me to be part of this panel. You are right, Turkish business and investors are seriously looking into Zimbabwe. And when it comes to this report, one of the first questions they ask is about data. There are others, if you ask, I would be happy to dwell on them too. But I think it is crucial to have this data coming from private sector. Perceptions are there, of course, but in this time and age, having the right data set is crucial. I can say that we are quite a young embassy. We were integrated in 2011, and we are lucky that the Zimbabwean embassy is also integrated in Ankara in 2019. So our Africa opening policy, including Latin America and Asia too, we need to be there. So being on the ground makes a huge difference. This is evident in our trade with Africa, for example. So considering we are rather young here in in Zimbabwe, we are trying to run hard, run fast. When it comes to the annual State of Industry and Commerce survey report, as I said, it is important to have the feeling of the business from the ground. And I was especially stricken by how candid the report is. And I'm also delighted to see business and policymakers are interacting in such a way. So the recommendations, I'm sure they will be well known. Some of them will be probably long term, some of them will be mid-term. But I was encouraged by the optimism actually in the business, one of the business indexes. Almost all of the sectors are quite optimistic about the future. So it is good for us to portray the realities and make informed decisions for our business and investment as well. As Ambassador Musoni was saying, there are challenges, of course. We have challenges everywhere, I must say. But among these challenges, like Honorable Minister alluded to energy situation, for example, that also brings up opportunities for foreign investors. We have prepared some slides actually. I don't know if they are turning because we were also asked. I was asked to tell about the Turkish experience. So there are some microeconomic indicators, and I was told it would be good to see how Turkey came to this stage, being number 17 in the global economy as a G20 member, and with its high import and export. So I would love to dwell into that, but let me stop here, not to stop maybe my colleagues.
Right, thank you, Ambassador. Please, a big round of applause for her. I will ask you to elaborate on some of the other issues that your companies are looking at. In fact, you're there. Come on, let's get you now. You said there were just a couple, just briefly, some of the issues that Turkish companies find a hindrance if they want to come into here, or what are they finding when they come to try and invest in Zimbabwe?
One of the first questions we get is about the legal framework, bilateral legal framework. Which we are striving to complete it. When I mean legal framework, I mean the bilateral trade and economy agreement, which is ratified, the avoidance of double taxation agreement, which I'm impressed by the speed of it. It is ready for signature. We are waiting for Zimbabwe's reply on the bilateral investment agreement. So business asks that, where are we when there is what legal documents will we go back to in case there is an issue? Secondly, they are asking about infrastructure. So that goes to energy, that goes to, of course, roads, but as I am repeating myself, I know, but that brings a lot of opportunities as well. And what I encourage, maybe as a way of suggesting for the coming reports too, if I may, when I have interactions with Turkish business circles, I always tell, yes, Zimbabwe is important, but look also the regionalization, because that is the ultimate aim, actually. So can you do something jointly with the neighboring countries, with SADC, with African Union? And I think it is for us too, but we would love to have more information on what are the end goals in regionalization and what would that mean for foreign investment. I'm ready to be corrected, but I understand part of the report does not involve those issues. It's more the local business doing. But maybe that is an idea to look into what would be more attractive to interact between outside Europe and Zimbabwe.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Please give a round of applause for taking it. You're right, Ambassador. Regional integration, regional value chains, it's an opportunity for Zimbabwean business to start expanding outside of our shores and increasing our export receipts, and of course taking advantage of the African Continental Free Trade Area, which is another discussion, I'm sure, for another day, because the question I ask you, of course, about the African Continental Free Trade Area is, are you ready? I think that's the question I'd like to ask. Benjamin, I hope I can call you that. Welcome, it's a pleasure having you here. You're, of course, from the US Embassy, Political and Economic Coordinator. Interesting report. At least it shows Zimbabwean business stays resilient this year. Of course, they're cautiously optimistic. I like that word for 2025. But of course, there are some pretty strong recommendations there, particularly looking at the fiscal, macroeconomic issues that need to be looked at by policyholders. What are your overlooking views of the report and also some of the recommendations that were put in place?
Okay, thank you, Andy. First of all, thank you very much to ZNCC leadership, Tapiwa, Chris, for the invitation to be on such a distinguished panel with these guests. Thank you for the question. I commend the creation of this report, which was respondent-based, member-based, really without any ulterior motives, just created feedback that can be published, and it's bound, and it's now can be shared with the government and with policymakers and lawmakers. So some of my first reactions, page 32 really had a nice graph that lays out something that we've been studying at the US Embassy, which is how to help the investment climate. We, maybe not everyone in the audience knows that US-Zimbabwe trade grew 20% from 2022 to 2023. It's a figure and a trend we'd like to continue to see growing. We don't have 2024 figures quite yet, but there's a few things that I think are, forgive the cliche, but low-hanging fruit, things that don't require a lot of legislation or investment in money, but really just political will and sort of rolling up your sleeves and trying to get things done. And I'm referring to some of the things in ease of doing business, such as cutting red tape, trying to improve bureaucratic stumbling blocks, as well as corruption. 81% of respondents said that corruption is weighing down the ease of doing business. What does that mean? What are the problems that are out there? Businesses, you in this audience, are creating wealth, you're creating jobs, you're creating value. Corruption is inherently taking from those who have created value and trying to get something without earning it, basically. And so how can we as diplomats, business, government, work together to help root out some of these causes and improve the business climate? We would love to see US-Zimbabwe trade and investment grow, and we are putting forward our best foot to court US investors that come to us and say, what's it like in Zimbabwe? We give them a candid answer, but we also give them an optimistic answer that there are opportunities. The wealth is on the ground, the wealth is in the people, and there are many, many opportunities here, and we'd love to see this relationship grow.
Benjamin, one of the biggest issues that I think is accepted, of course, is Zimbabwe's debt burden. I know that the US is involved in debt negotiations as part of the debt negotiations that the President Dr. Mnangagwa put in place to try and solve that problem that we have, so we can start freeing up resources for where we need it, which is infrastructure, hospitals, and so even social welfare programs. Your views on the debt issue vis-a-vis Zimbabwe?
So this is a tricky one. Debt is an issue that many countries face. The United States of America has a national debt. Many countries have a national debt. It's a complicated history going back to the late 90s with the Zimbabweans' debt, and but we think the sort of the rebooting of the structured dialogue, which recommenced last Monday, a week ago Monday, is an opportunity for the government and development partners and creditors to talk in candid terms about what how to reach a consensus where debt arrears is a possibility. I think the high-level dialogue meeting was a good sort of, like I said, reboot. But I think in 2025 there's a lot of work to do in the working groups that advance, along the different pillars: economic, governance, and land, to see if we can get to a place where the creditors agree that progress has been made and debt forgiveness or arrears clearance is something that can be talked about really in brass tacks.
Thank you for that. Thanks. Please give Benjamin a big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. So we're looking here then, we've looked at if we can digitize governments, what are the recommendations. 80% of government services are digitalized. That would be perfect. Of course, e-government is the way to go. I think anyone's been to the passport office recently, you'll understand how that really works effectively. We've also talked here about property rights. These are some of the recommendations from the ZNCC reports. Uphold property rights by accelerating institutional and political reforms. These reforms, such as land tenure, are critical to creating a stable investment climate and increasing investor confidence. We know there is a discussion happening at the debt arrears talk looking at that as well. And I think the President has been clear on the views of government on that. Of course, invest in skills development. I think that's key. But I deliberately left the bankers for last, if that's okay. I'll start with you, Tinashe. Access to finance. We're talking here about the high levels of interest rates. We're talking about short-term finance. We're even talking about possibly 2030 restricting any long-term US dollar lending, because even before then we may even go back to a mono currency. And we're talking about not really concessionary rates. I see the central bank has put this targeted finance facility for productive sectors there. I don't know if this is what was announced yesterday, so we'll have to see how effective that will be. But your views, I mean, can business access good funding? Can they access cheaper funding, concessionary funding that allows them to grow, expand, retool, industrialize? These are some of the objectives, not just of Zimbabwe, but of SADC.
Thank you very much, Andy and everybody. I think you sort of talked about it or looked at it, which is resilience. And I think in 2024, what we pick up from what has happened in Zimbabwe is that business has actually been extremely resilient. And I think kudos to ZNCC and everybody who has really huddled around the critical issues, because it's a very difficult trading environment. But coming out of it, what we realize is people are actually extremely resilient. And that's something that we can build on going into the future. Now, you talk about financial markets. Unfortunately, we just don't have the depth as far as Zimbabwe is concerned. But the big problem has been the crowding out of the little capital that's there. So government, and I'm hoping that government that's actually here can also understand this, that the resilience is coming from business. Now, the little capital that's there is being crowded out by government. So when you look at government, what government is borrowing, it's closer to 90% of our financial markets. If you look at the TVs that get discounted in the market, those are primarily government TVs, and that means that there's very little capital. Right? So in terms of monetary policy from our side, I wouldn't have a problem with it. The resilience that we have as far as, lending rates and what's there, I don't have a problem with it. Because at the end of the day, what you're trying to do is you're trying to protect the servers, people who are actually serving the economy. The big problem is that the little capital that's there is being taken by government. That's the first problem. Then the second problem that you have is the interest rate that the government is actually paying. So this is where I have a problem with the RPZ, for example, when they introduce these NCCDs and they take liquidity out of the market and they keep the market, at 0%. What are you saying? And then when you look at the TVs that are in the market from government at 18%, go nowhere inflation is. So what it does is that in the future, so in the next year or 2 years' time, you just don't have enough capital. So how resilient is business? Now, the biggest problem I have with the budget is that
and I'm happy the minister here, is they're not acknowledging that actually Zimbabweans are very resilient. Because they're going with the new taxes, where they're taxing everyone, the hairdresser, the barber, I think that there's a big problem there, because Zimbabwe doesn't have a safety net. That's critical to understand. We don't have a safety net. We're not in America or in the UK where you can get medical aid for free, where you can get medical services or all other services for free on the dole, unemployment benefits, all that. So government has to sort of understand that when you're saying you want to tax the informal sector, and already the informal sector has shown you that it is very resilient, but don't test them. These are people who are barely making a living. Now, with no support whatsoever from the social services ministries, with no pension, how much can we really tax if you're really going after these people? My submission is anyone who earns less than $250 or even $300 should not be taxed at all. It's just recognizing. It's government recognizing that these people, whatever they're doing, it's really to survive. Whatever profit that they make, because Zimbabwe's distortions the cycles are such that you could have 2 months that you make a really ridiculous profits, and then you have 10 months where it's dry. That's the nature of the trading environment. So it's government just recognizing that, oh, okay, you're in the informal sector. Nobody wants to be in the informal sector. It's long hours. The World Bank has come up with a report. There's not really much that these guys are earning. It's really subsistence living. So if government, and here I'm appealing to our minister because he's here, I'm really appealing, it's just recognizing that a lot of these people are in the informal sector. They've been resilient, but they cannot survive. As far as tax them as far as VAT is concerned. And it might not be popular, but you can increase VAT to 20%, for example, but don't go after them as far as their income is concerned. In the UK, VAT is actually 20%. Right? So if you want consumptive tax, if you want these people, because almost everybody is buying something, but it's a good indication. If people are buying something, it means that they're consuming and they've made the money. But don't tax the little that they have. They can't go to the banks because the capital is not there, because you crowded them out. Now the regulatory environment is just very difficult for these people. And yet these are the people that are sustaining the state.
Tinashe, while I've got you there, the central bank in the deputy governor's presentation, he said, and he said it with confidence, he says, we now have a free-floating exchange rate. Then he showed us graphs of a parallel market rate and then an exchange rate, right? So I'm not sure which is free-floating. And as you said, it's the government that's buying most it's the government that's buying most of the currency anyway, so it's in their interest to keep the exchange rate as low as they possibly can. So I'm not sure, willing buyer, willing seller. And the ZNCC has said we want a free-floating rate, we want the rate to float and go ahead. What are your views on this exchange rate? Because the exchange rate is the major issue. Is it the major issue, ladies and gentlemen?
Okay, so I beg to differ. It's irrelevant. A lot of what sustains Zimbabwe is diaspora remittances. It's US dollars that has got nothing to do with the policy. So they can do whatever they want with the policy, but there's no impact whatsoever. There's no transmission mechanism into the actual market because people survive on real US dollars. The real threat would be a monocurrency. So if you make it illegal for people to actually trade, and here again I'm appealing to the government to look at it from a social services, that if you're not providing the social services, if you're not providing the capital, then bear in mind that the only way that people are surviving, it's US dollars. And those US dollars, it's a way in which we protect ourselves from government policies because they're never consistent. So whether they say they're, you know, so up until the time when But I don't know why they would have a problem with the US dollar, because that's actually how that's how the economy is resilient. Like I said, if you look at cabinet, the way cabinet is done is you have international relations, and that's the external world. Then you have commerce, but half of our ministries are social services ministries. Now, if those social services ministries are not supplying the protection that they must, if you look at education, and this is a big worry, education during 2018, so during the dollarized era, education was 6% of our GDP, closer to 7% of our GDP. It's now down to 2.8%, and it's going to reduce even further. And where your social ministries were providing really good help to those who were vulnerable, BEAM, if you think about it. If you look at the latest budget, what BEAM is doing is barely sufficient. And we know that foreign aid, you can't direct foreign aid to education. They sort of prefer health services for whatever reason, but you can't direct it to education. So the only way people are surviving is in the informal sector. That's people, the welfare has now been reduced to diasporans and to those in the informal sector. So policy must just recognize that and say, well, although we would like monocurrency, and whether they're right or not, it's a moot point, it doesn't matter. What matters is how do we ensure that whoever is trading right now in business, they're able to do so. And the resilience, we can push the resilience to 2030. Then beyond 2030, we can start talking about monocurrency because we can say, well, we've been consistent for the last last 5 years. So the big problem, the big risk, whether they float the currency or not, it's irrelevant. It's not the argument we should have. The big risk is if they introduce monocurrency, then they make it illegal for people who are doing what government is supposed to do. Because then, therefore, if I trade in US dollars, then it's going to be illegal and I can't trade. And Zimbabwe gets closer to 200 million a month in US dollars. And if you think about it, all that money is going to our industry. It's going into capacitating businesses to operate. If that's not there, if it's made illegal, then I think that what we are hurting the most is the vulnerable. You and I know how to get around the monocurrency, but the people who are trading at the informal sector, it will be very difficult for them.
Great, thank you. Please give Tinashe a big round of applause. I was at a recent conference, and some of the numbers that I was given about the imports that we're doing was quite staggering. Remember the graph that Prof gave us, money going out and little coming in? Well, when I found out that we imported $260 million worth of tires every year. $260 million worth of tires. Over $900 million worth of cars. Okay, that's $1.1 billion we're spending on cars and tires. I don't understand it, to be frank. Why don't we set up a car manufacturing or a tire plant somewhere? It only costs us $60 million for a tire plant, yeah? So I don't know. But anyway, this is just one of those things we need to look at to try and put our money together. Now, Humphrey, he's Regional Chief Operating Officer. Now, before I ask him to comment, I'd like you all to give FX Bank a big round of applause. They are one of our very big supporters in Zimbabwe. They've been here all these years with us. It doesn't matter where we are, sanctions, no sanctions, you've been with us. So thank you so much for your support as FX Bank. Humphrey, one of the issues, of course, that's coming through very clearly is access to finance, access to trade lines, the ability for Zimbabwean business to access at least some form of concessionary funding, possibly to boost their exports and so forth. I mean, you can obviously comment, of course, on the report, but also speak to us about the trade lines, and also, is Zimbabwe ready? African Continental Free Trade Area is here. We don't seem to be doing a lot about it. There doesn't seem to be a lot of knowledge in the room. I can ask a question. How many here have studied the African Continental Free Trade Area agreements? Oh, wow. Okay. Guys, I would suggest you do very quickly. Anyway, sir, I'll hand over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Moderator, for the kind words. I don't take it for granted. And it continues to encourage us to keep doing what we're doing in Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe means a lot to us. You know, it was one of the founding members of the African Export Program, and we continue to support the economy to the best extent possible. But before I respond to your question, I want to add my voice to the views that are expressed about this report, this survey report. I think we need to commend ZSCC. Perhaps we will not commend ourselves on that. Yes, the round of applause is actually very well deserved on this occasion. We do not commend ourselves a lot. I saw the report for the first time yesterday, and I was very impressed because it was a combination of academic excellence and practicality. You know, they said they are the voice of business. So what we see in the report is actually the voice of business. This is the business, private sector, talking about the challenges they face in optimizing their capacities, in improving their competitiveness and in doing business. So I'm moving a step forward. What I liked was the fact that the recommendations were very well founded, and then there is a tracking system. So after every 12 months, they go back to the private sector to say, how has government performed in the last 12 months in terms of all these issues that we raised 12 months ago. So it's something that I think is very, very helpful, and my encouragement to Honorable Minister the President would be to ensure that government mainstreams the recommendations that come out of this survey report. They are very, very relevant and helpful. Now, if I may deviate momentarily, if I may, just to talk about Afreximbank a little bit, because it becomes relevant to what we are talking about it. And still, I've been in Zimbabwe for 6 years. Sometimes when I move around, people mischaracterize what we do in this market. And, you know, they say we're a government bank, we are this, we are that. So what I do is that anytime I'm in a forum like this, I try to explain to those who are there. Because, you know, they say faith comments by hearing. If people do not hear, they wouldn't understand. So, Afreximbank was set up primarily to facilitate trade by African governments. That is the main mandate of the bank. So, lending to public sector, to government, is actually an aberration. If you understand the definition of trade. Trade takes place in the private sector. So, we only support public sector to the extent that they are unable to support themselves or attract financing from maybe IFIs or the international community. That's what we do. These are member countries. We can't let them suffer if we can support them. But even in doing that, we apply private sector principles because that is our bread and butter. Set up by African governments to facilitate trade both intra and extra-African. So what we've done in between is we have expanded the definition of that to include trade-enabling infrastructure. And as a result, you will find that we have financed a lot of network infrastructure, railways, roads that lead to the border posts. Of course, you are aware we finance the Bakery border posts together with our partners in South Africa. So the bank is here to assist, is here to help improve competitiveness. And within the context of the AFCFTA, and that's what I would recommend to ZSCC, because when I was looking at the report, I didn't quite see a lot of emphasis on cross-border trade. It was more about domestic trade, even though they mentioned in some page about trade facilitation, which is cross-border. But I think the next year you should emphasize cross-border trade under the context of AFCFTA. So you can understand the pain point of the businesses, things that would militate against them doing business elsewhere in Africa. AFCFTA by next year is going to come fully on stream. They are doing guided trade now. How prepared are Zimbabwean businesses to take advantage of the opportunity. Suddenly you're able to sell to 1.3 billion people, $3.4 trillion of GDP. Are you ready to take advantage of that? If not, what are the challenges that are affecting your ability to take advantage of the NFCFT economic stream? So the mandate of the bank are two critical pillars that we look at. One of them is what we call intra-African trade and support for AFCFTA implementation. As well as I know, the mandate of AFCFTA is effectively trade liberalization. But without a bank like ours, who would then focus on facilitation, that liberalization will not yield any fruit. I mean, if there's a free trade between Nigeria and Zimbabwe, how would goods find their way from Zimbabwe to Nigeria? They have to transport one way or the other. How will payments take place? So that's where we come. So we are like the technical advisors to the AFCFTA within that context. That's the first, and we have quite a few initiatives. The second is what we call industrialization and export development. Again, the Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs was talking about heritage, and he referred a lot to minerals. The problem with extractive industry on the continent is they operate as enclaves. There are limited linkages between the extractive industries and the local economies. So, minimal limited processing taking place, minimal participation by local operators, minimum assistance in development priorities of the government. Now, what the bank has said under that pillar is that we have to encourage African commodities to be processed within Africa, one way or the other, before they are exported. Because if that doesn't happen, we're exporting value. You would imagine that between Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, and Nigeria, we contribute, or they contribute, almost 60% of global cocoa. But their share of the value chain of the cocoa production is just about 6%. 94% exported. Without a cocoa, that processing chocolate and all that will take. So we say we need to encourage. So beneficiation is something we're emphasizing. Processing value addition is something that we're emphasizing. So those things are through the instrumentalities of what we call the industrial parks, special economic zones, and all that, which we are doing in different markets, and we started the conversation today. So it's to make it known to the audience that Afreximbank as a bank is available and able to help you to optimize all these opportunities. Now your question was about access to finance. So there are a few things I think that usually affect the ability to attract financing. First is the readiness of the borrower. Sometimes I see quite a few proposals come to me, and I say to them, "But you need to do a business plan. You don't have a detailed account, you don't have this, you don't have that." And the saying about the infrastructure paradox is there are quite a few projects looking for financing. Here there's a lot of capital looking for right projects. So how do you close that gap? How do you make the right projects, make the right kind of financing? It's readiness. Now, some people, it's just about concept. They think, okay, I have this project. I just go to a bank and get financing. By the time you start asking the questions, they get frustrated. But if you know that you need to do certain things at the beginning, and through what we call our project preparation facility, we help with those early stage funding to help you do the technical studies, to do the feasibility studies, to do all studies environmental required before you can come to a bank to say, now I have a bankable project. At that point, the project meets the financing and it becomes easy. So that's the first point. So when I looked at that report and I saw that 72% contribution by informal sector, what that means is those sectors are not structured. Effectively, 72% of the economy cannot access finance. Because I don't lend that I'll give from into an unstructured entity. I also became aware that the Ministry of Finance is working on a framework to formalize the informal sector. And Nigeria did this some time ago, and suddenly, within a year, they became the largest economy by bringing the informal operators into the formal sector. So I think it's something that the government will need to take very seriously. Find a way, that's a large chunk. And the last time I heard about SMEs, contributes almost 2/3 to the economy of this country. Their access to banking credit is just about 4%. So that's a mismatch. Now, the bank is also helping in that regard. Through our SME development program, we are assisting the SME sector. I was very pleased to see in the report that JNCC was encouraging IDC to talk to Afreximbank and African Development Bank to access funding for the SME sector. I think it's important because SMEs also are fragmented, but you need an aggregator sometimes. And that is where the IDC could play a role, to act as an aggregator and then do an on-lending. Or IDBZ, I was speaking with Dr. Kupe today. The Industrial Development Bank can also help to access the financing and then lend, because we do not do retail banking, so we are a wholesale institution. So these are the things. And then through an initiative we call ETC, Export Trading Companies, which the bank is promoting together with the African Continental Free Trade, is to integrate the small-scale players into the international value chains. Because in their capacities, they won't be able to negotiate fair trade deals with buyers abroad. But if you have an ETC, which the bank has promoted in different countries, and is promoting, continues to promote, even here in Zimbabwe, we're talking to a few people. The ETC will aggregate and then negotiate, be able to negotiate with the buyers abroad, favorable terms. And then we provide financing to those parties as well. So there are quite a few initiatives. I think that's capital, to be specific to your question. I do not believe that there are enough bankable products. And that's where we can help people to take their project from concept to bankability. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that. And of course, you've seen Afreximbank's confidence in Zimbabwe, the beautiful headquarters going up just here in town in Harare, the opposite Greenwood Park. So you heard what Afreximbank does. And also, let's not forget about green financing as well. I know IDBZ, where are you? I can't tell. IDBZ do have access to green funding, the environment funding, if I'm not mistaken. So that's also another opportunity, particularly if you have projects that tick all of the green funding requirements. Right, I'm going to have to now open up several questions because, of course, we were running late. So, can I have someone with some roving microphones, please? And we open up for questions. Okay, I'm going to, don't worry, I'll do my Olympics.
Thank you. So I want to quickly correct you.
Oh, me? Okay.
Yes, because you said I didn't say that we have a fully fronted. I didn't say that.
Okay.
So I want us to understand that that is the objective. That's something that we are working towards, so that we don't get misquoted. But I want now that I've got the money, I just wanted to make a few comments on the back of some of the contributions that have been made. Firstly, that foreign receipts reflect largely, and they are all broken down there on the Reserve Bank website and on the Ministry of Finance. So it's broken down, so you can tell what is coming out of each sector. It's coming out of production activities, coming out of remittances and so on. So yes, remittances are growing, and a large portion of those receipts, but that's not the full story. In fact, the full story is elsewhere, not remittances. But it is a very key component. So I just wanted to correct that. The second one is, I mentioned that the current account and the balance of payments indicate a situation of stability. If anything, it's indicating a situation of growth. And those figures are there for you to see. So basically what it means is that your exchange rate should not be fluctuation the way it is. Why does it fluctuate? There are many factors. Expectations, negative expectations, and we've had some of them here. All those issues are the ones we're trying to work to correct. So for example, predictability needs you to be consistent, and avoid sudden changes in policy. So those are issues that we can continue to build upon. Then additionality, the Reserve Bank's participation in the forex market through a willing buyer, willing seller arrangement has shown us a few, as a country, when I say us, I mean Zimbabwe, a few interesting facts. Firstly, placements in the forex market is not being absorbed in total. So what does that tell you? Is that the forex is enough. Generally, I mean, there will be fluctuations. So on average, businesses can access forex that they need for legitimate needs. That's what it should tell you. Lastly, concessionary financing. You know, it's difficult. We were talking about the issue of debt, arrears and all that. So concessionary financing has to come from somewhere. But this is a debate internationally about the restructuring of the financial architecture, the global financial architecture. That's something that we all need to work towards, to get it restructured and to get it moving. Thanks.
Right, thank you, Dr. Martin. And can you please give a round of applause to clarification on the Reserve Bank. At least they want to get there to a free floating exchange. Ambassador.
Thank you. I just want to support the last speaker on the question of foreign exchange. That first, what I want to say is that in international trade, when the remittances of money provided, there is no charity. Money is not given for free. So, from that premise, all the US dollars which this country has already been earned. I spent school in America. That's why I went to school. America does not give US dollars to its own citizens. They earn it. So if you have US dollars in this country, they have been earned by Zimbabweans. They are not coming free from the Federal Reserve Bank in New York, provided finance. They have been earned by Zimbabwe. How are they being earned? Number one, gold. Unlike many other countries which sell products to earn forex, Zimbabweans, we did money. And since 2016, when the SME sector was legalized, up to $3 to $4 billion is gold. And a decision has been made by the central bank and the Ministry of Finance. Is gold a commodity or is gold money? The whole world says gold is money. It has been money for 5,000 years, unlike the US dollar, which is only 300 years old. Why do we discount gold as money? We saw it in November last year. We taxed gold and it disappeared. We only ended up with 10 notes from 10 US dollar notes from petrol. Because gold disappeared from the market. We removed the tax by February, and all the $100 notes, crispy new ones, were in our pockets. So gold is money, and a decision has been made fundamental by the Reserve Bank and by the Ministry of Finance. Is gold money or it's a commodity? If it is money, let's treat it like money. Remittances by the diasporans are not free. It's because the government has made it, or the current president has made it possible for diasporans to feel about the confidence of the economy at home. They are sending their money to build all these houses which you are seeing, because they have confidence in the economy. So it's not charity money from them. It's actually earned money. And we have simply, and then tobacco is the second after gold, consistently. These are Gurunga farmers, Marondera farmers, who are earning the foreign currency then. But in all the discussions which we've had here, they don't address the people who are earning the foreign currency, who also take before we are trading. Then the presumption from the banker is that the money comes from Samora Machel Street. It doesn't. It comes from the people I told you about. If we take care of those and we prioritize the dollar, not as a commodity, as money, I mean the gold as money, all the problems of arbitrage, which we are talking about, disappear. Let's treat gold as money, I think.
Right, thank you, Ambassador. Can we have a few more questions, please? Please, if you say who you are, stand up, say your name and organization if you can go on. Yeah. Just embarrassing.
Hello everyone, my name is Rubita Mashaya from NRTV. My question really is directed towards the Deputy Minister of Finance and probably Afro-Exim Bank. It seems as if when it comes to the issues of the debt overhang, Africa, when we look at the global statistics, out of the $315 trillion that is owed in global debt, Africa is less than 4%. But we are struggling to repay that, firstly. And secondly, we've got the largest resources in terms of mineral resources. Why are we failing to sit down and have conversations with each other? Currently, I feel that as Africans, we are talking at each other. Why is it there is no common consensus and dialogue amongst African countries? I feel that African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement is coming, but we really haven't been able to do much trade amongst ourselves as African countries, other SADC and other COMESA and other regional reserves that are already there. Or what gives us the confidence to believe that when it comes to the conversation around the African Continental Free Trade Area, we're going to be successful?
Thank you for that question. Inter-African trade is only 14%. That's how much we trade amongst ourselves in Africa.
Thank you very much, Andy. My name is Mike Kamugeremu. I'm the immediate past president of ZNCC. My question is actually coming from our members and is directed to the Deputy Governor as well as the Deputy Minister. It's around the commercial paper that you introduced on 5 April 2024. In lieu of owed auction monies that are owed to members, as well as monies owed to exporters from surrender garments. When you announced on 5 April 2024, you indicated that the commercial paper will mature in 12 months and 24 months respectively, earning an interest of 7.5% per month, per annum, sorry. And then when the paper eventually came, we were then surprised to discover that the tenure had been increased to 36 months and the interest rate had been reduced to 4%. So members want to understand how you arrived at that. We've been trying to inquire so as to get an answer. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that question. Didn't I see someone else somewhere here? No? I should pick someone. Questions are. You want to have a comment, Minister? No, of course you are.
Thank you so much, and thank you all our presenters. My issue, maybe my brother Tinashe can elaborate more on his position on the informal sector. I think after the bank touched on one aspect that I wanted to inquire about as well. The first issue I have is us being comfortable with a sector that we call informal. I think we should be worried about it and find ways of formalizing it. I would rather we have a vibrant SME sector than to say, let us leave the informal sector alone. So I want to hear his views around the need to formalize the informal sector. Maybe not primarily for tax purposes. But I personally believe it's in their interest to do their business formally. You might have heard their access to finance is at as low as 4% when they contribute so much to the economy. But again, when you have such a big sector that is not really subjected to formal regulation, in my view, it's a big problem. So while I appreciate what he believes taxation might do to their business, I want to know if he believes formalization is important or they should remain in the informal sector.
Great, thank you. Let's take these questions and I'll open up for a final round. Okay, Deputy Minister, let's start with you. It's a question, I think, for the ages, isn't it? We have all the resources, we've got all the people, we've got everything in Africa, yet we are under debt distress. So I suppose the question is, why is that so, and what can we do about it?
Thanks, Andy. Maybe let me address a few issues that came from the panel before I go to Ruby and Mike's question. Because I think some of them were directed at our ministry or at government. I think there was a submission that came from the US Embassy on cutting down red tape. I agree. Sometimes we have too many bureaucratic processes. You know, to open a restaurant, you need 18 licenses. I'm not sure if that's your honorable minister or not. But the OPC has set up a task force that is supposed to coordinate all the ministries, departments, and agencies to make sure that we streamline, especially this licensing process. I think it's a bit cumbersome, so that's been addressed. Corruption, I totally agree. You know, it's something that affects the youth, which is, you know, the largest part of the population and constituency that I represent. And it becomes even worse when it becomes systemic. One of the things that were mentioned that government is doing is digitization. I think the moment that we take on most of the services on e-platforms, we reduce corruption, but also trying to deal with this whole cash syndrome, cash economy, also increases corruption. So this is something that I think as a collective we should deal with, because I'd like to think that corruption is actually more ripe in the private sector than it is in the public sector. But I do stand guided on that. And then there was a submission from Tinashe. I didn't want to leave this lingering because, you know, you're speaking like a politician. And I think it roused a lot of issues that need to be clarified. It's important that we clarify because some of our leaders are here, Ambassador Trump is here, and they second us to government. Our policies are derived from our ideology. An ideology that is then supposed to inform policy. What is our ideology? In very broad terms, the party that seconds us to government is a mass socialist party with Zimbabwean characteristics. You know, so when issues like, you know, we're overtaxing the poor come into place, you know, that's misaligned with ideology and it sends out the wrong messaging. So two distinct distinctions need to be made on the informal sector and what the minister has described as micro and small to medium enterprises. We have multi-million-dollar businesses that overnight have gone informal. Overnight. And again, this is stemming from us having a cash economy. It's very easy to close shop at the face of it and still operate in the background and, you know, be a capitalist and not pay anything to the fiscus. Micro to small, the small guys that Tinashe is talking about are actually seeking to formalize and pay taxes because they realize that if I have a tax clearance, I can open a bank account. If I open a bank account, that means I can have a trading history. If I have a trading history, that means that I can have access to financing. So the small guys actually realize that there's need, you know, to formalize. Now, whether our tax framework or tax infrastructure is conducive for the small guy, I think is another question, but that need has been realized. So it's very important that we distinguish between the informal sector and the formal. And you find that a lot of the taxes, especially on the consumptive side, that the minister has proposed are somewhat of indirect taxes that touch on behavior. Talk about the sugar tax or the fast food tax or the plastic tax. These are all hovering around, you know, let's get our people healthier. Let us have our climate, our environment greener, for example. It's one of two things, you know, either, you know, you just don't buy it because it's become slightly expensive, or, you know, you stop using the green plastics. But you see the tendency of some of our capitalists sometimes is, you know, on a $5 meal, you're supposed to pay 0.5%. You know, that's 2.5 cents that's supposed to go on a $5 meal. put it to $5.50. And then it makes it seem as if government policy has made our people poorer. So I will say that the policy intent is actually thought out in line with our ideology, which is the redistributive effect. So that should not go without saying, at least from us as government. It's very important. He mentions that what makes the economy resilient is the US dollar. And the Ambassador Trump then comes in and says that the US dollars are earned. This is true, but I'd like to further refine on what the ambassador said. Our young people are not earning US dollars, they're actually creating value. When these young miners go and mine gold, they've created value. It is just the environment that has translated that value into US dollars. In the diaspora, the money that comes as remittances is actually not earned in US dollars for the most part. It's earned in pounds and rands, but it then translates into US dollars because of the environment that we have. So what we need to remove from our mindset and our psyche is the US dollar dominance as a form of value. And how do we do that as government? It's to make sure that in January, Governor, if a loaf of bread was 13.5 zinc, in December should be 13.5 zinc. Then the ordinary Zimbabwean won't care whether it's holding a zinc, a rand, or US dollar. It is the stability that Zimbabweans are looking for, and that they found comfort in the US dollar. These are very important issues to point out from a government perspective. Now, going out to Ruby's question on the debt overhang and why Africa is struggling, why we're not talking to each other, coming together with a plan as to how we can come out of this. It actually goes to the depth of how the global economic architecture is actually structured. It's laid in a way that countries like Zimbabwe are not supposed to come out. If you look at I saw the recommendation from ZNCC on public debt. You said that we should reduce the debt to GDP ratio. Right now it's around 65%. Sorry? Legally, according to the Act, we're not supposed to reach 70%. I will be irresponsible and give personal opinion and say, I actually don't think this ratio matters contextually, especially for Zimbabwe. I mean, you look at the United States, they're at 127%. You look at China, they're at 200-something% debt to GDP. What the global financial architecture is looking at when they look at our figures as Africans, as developing countries, is liquidity. They don't look at solvency. So if I was to proffer irresponsible advice, I would say, look, maybe our borrowing in the past that has got us here has not been as responsible as it should be. It has not been disciplined. But if there is a project that needs financing that's fully ring-fenced and can pay for itself, I will go to Humphrey and I will give guarantee for that project because I know it's going to pay for itself, even if it increases the debt to GDP ratio. So sometimes we get confined by the Bretton Woods institutions to follow certain parameters, and it's understandable, we owe the money, we have to follow certain parameters, but I think as Zimbabweans, even as Africans, we need to look at local context to see what is good for our country. And if it means sometimes foregoing what may appear to be right, then we should do it if it is good for Zimbabwe. And again, what discussions are we having as Africa? I think even if you look at a regional level, you'll see that the president, as chairman of SADC, has been echoing the Nika philosophy and spreading it across the region. I think as Africans, when we come to the realization that we need to make sure that we mobilize resources locally, and we make sure that we beneficiate our minerals. And to the extent that we are able to beneficiate, we tax at a premium, like what we've done through put a beneficiation tax to unprocessed raw materials that are being exported, you make sure that you recover, because indeed these are finite taxes. And if one then decides, do you take that and pay off debt, or do you invest in growing the economy so that you can pay off your debt faster? It now becomes a matter of national strategy and how you look at it as the whole of government. Then Mike talks about quarantined NNCDs. I'm not sure, I don't think the expiration for any of the papers as the maturity has come to pass. But you know, like the journey that we've had, I think, has been a bit of a strenuous one. 2024, because of El Nino, came with so many unexpected expenditures as far as procurement of maize, social support, in a bid to make sure that our people do not starve. You know, a lot of people don't even realize there's a drought this year handling because of the response that government had. You know, people don't realize this was the worst drought in 4 decades because of the response that government had. For government to have been able to do that and still maintain macroeconomic stability means that there had to be restructuring in certain instances. And unfortunately, I think that some of these quarantined NNCDs were part of the restructuring exercise. And again, this happened in a lot of other areas. I don't think that there's any aspect within our expenditure that is receiving to the fullest of their laundry list. So this is something that industry will have to bear with us. We'll continue to have discussions and see how best we can address this issue. I know it's been very topical. Believe it or not, the minister actually behaves as if he also has an NNCD with the way he's always checking up on these and expressing concern. But it is something that we're also equally concerned about. But again, the circumstantial issues surrounding this particular year have necessitated us having to restructure these NNCDs. Governor, I'm not too sure if there's any further context to the quarantine NNCD.
Right, let me come to you first, Deputy Governor, then I'll come to you for you to comment on the debt.
Yeah, no, just to get, and you're absolutely right. I mean, I think there was also an aspect, it depends which one. So this is not, it depends which particular cases. There are different cases, they are not all the same. But you should know that there was a preference from the market to have an instrument, paper, that could be made tradable. So because it became tradable, there was also a reduction in the interest rate. So I'm not sure whether that's what he's talking about, but obviously specific cases can be addressed, or specific groups of cases can be addressed.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Deputy Governor. He's here, so you can question him further, yeah, during lunch. Right, Humphrey, just very briefly, your comment on that.
Yeah, in order not to repeat what the Honorable Deputy Minister was saying on the debt sustainability issue, I just want to add a few things. The first is I agree that African governments are becoming smarter. Perhaps mistakes have been made in the past. Perhaps the nature of those loans, sometimes you're giving 40-year facility at 0.5%. You really don't know what to do with it. You probably could just use it to pay salary. So you borrow for recurrent expenditure. You are not increasing the productive base. So if you borrow for the purposes of increasing the productive base, then you will have the capacity to repay those loans. So those are the things that are becoming smart. So what we see these days is no. That government, instead of borrowing on their own balance sheets, instead of burdening the fiscals, they will set up an SPV. They've started commercializing borrowing in that sense. So they set up an SPV to borrow, put in equity if required, put in guarantees if necessary, bring in private sector players, operate whatever it is on a commercial basis, then that thing is able to repay. So that's what I'm seeing these days, but the debt sustainability issue is fine. But in terms of whether Africa has one voice, I think, and it wasn't the public domain, I think on the sidelines of the African Development Bank annual meetings in Nairobi, an association of African DFIs attempted to form what we call the Nairobi Club, in line with the Paris Club. And the purpose of that Nairobi Club was effectively to make Africa to speak with one voice. First, to protect African DFIs. Second, to have one voice speaking in terms of Africa's debt. Because, of course, you and I know what they call a perception premium. Is debt to Africa always attracts premium in terms of rates. To therefore, even for similarly rated countries or similarly rated institutions, because of that perception that it is Africa. So this association of multilateral FIs are now focusing on this. So they are now finalizing their governance structures. And I think with time, all of us will be aware of it. It's something that I take very seriously. Then she said whether AFCFTA will work. I see no reason why it wouldn't work. I mean, the main essence of capitalism is taking advantage of opportunities. I do not see any downside in the AFCFTA structure. It's all good or positive. I don't see why, if I'm able to sell beyond Zimbabwe and I'm competitive, I'm innovative, why wouldn't I take advantage of it? So it's taking time because they're still negotiating quite a few principles, rules of origin, conflict resolution issues, which goods will have a free, non-tariff barrier issues, etc. But like I said, next year we expect it to come fully on stream. And I think business owners should be ready to take advantage of that. Thank you.
Right, please, yeah, big round of applause for that. Guys, you have to be ready. You really do. And for those of you who didn't put your hands up, which is 99% of the room, I suggest you go immediately and get a copy of the AFCFTA agreement. Look at the tariffs that are going to go down. I think the Competition and Tariff Commission have it on their website. They're the ones who are driving Zimbabwe's negotiations for the tariff. But the tariffs will soon be zero across most products. In fact, I think we've only got about 5 years left, if I'm not mistaken, on some of the more key products. But otherwise, you're going to, if you're not careful, you'll face stiff competition from imports. That's the bottom line. Yeah? If you're not careful, you'll be imported out of the market, guys. And then we can talk production all we want, because it won't matter. Because the products coming in will be cheaper than the products you can make here. So let's be prepared for that. Right, Tinashe, I'm going to ask you to ask the question for the Minister, your views, to elaborate your views on the need for the informal sector to formalize, and then your final comments, then I'll go from the Ambassador just for some final comments to wrap up.
Thank you very much, Andy. I think those were very good interventions by the ministers, because it then gets us to think. And the whole purpose of having these discussions is actually for us to think. Because I think a lot of times policy lacks thinking. So the idea of formalizing the informal sector, are we not better off formalizing? And here, just to prove that I'm actually not a politician, but I'll go into the theory. And the theory I will use is Schumpeter, right? Businesses on their own would not formalize. We forget that, because of the 300, 400 years of industrialization, we almost think that it's inevitable that business want to formalize. No, the natural inclination is to informalize, is to have a cottage industry, is to sustain yourself, a little bit of profit, and from a consumptive perspective, that's okay. The reason why we formalize it is the reason why we had the Industrial Revolution. And Schumpeter puts it quite correctly, that it's the idea of the industrialization is all around credit and the credit market. So if you don't have a credit market, there's no need to formalize. The only reason why you formalize is because you want to partake in the credit market or the capital markets. That's the way you can grow. And the only way you can grow is by tapping into the capital markets. Now, in Zimbabwe, if you can't tap into the capital markets, why would you formalize? The only reason why I want to list my business is because I get a value, immediate value. I get capital for growth. I get to buy my yacht because I've got a valuation. I believe in capitalism, so we might have differences there, but I'll get to it. But the reason why businesses formalize is capital markets and the credit market. Now, if 90% of the credit market is government, then why would you bother? Most businesses, the minute capital markets open up, they would list. And because the listing requirements demand that you formalize, they would just go ahead with it. But if I go to my bank manager today, Citco, this is public information, they went to their banks, and they were asking for 5 million, it was approved, but they didn't get liquidity. Why would they continuously be listed? We know Netflix is delisting. Why are they delisting? Because they realize that from their own capital, friends and family, they can raise the capital. Why list? Why go through that onerous process of listing? And this is the critical thing, because now coming back to the informal sector, is that don't take it for granted that business want to formalize. No. The natural inclination is to actually not be formalized. In 2013, the entire credit market in Zim, the debt market, was $4 billion US. It's now about 1.5 to 1.2, 1.5 billion US. It's shrunk. This is 15 years later, 10 years later, it has shrunk.
You could wind up.
Okay, so some of the credit market, the capital markets, more and more businesses would formalize. So that's how we link. From a theoretical perspective, that's how we link. Then from the minister, deputy minister, my comment on the social net, I was actually sympathetic to you. Because I say cabinet, half of cabinet ministers are social services ministries. Now, if I had my way, they wouldn't be there. I'm a full-on capitalist, I wouldn't have them. But I'm saying I'm accepting that this is the reality of our country. Half of the ministries is because they really want to take care of the poor. Now, a pro-poor government would then recognize that a lot of these poor people are earning less than $300. And because we're not supporting them from a safety net, just let them be. And I'm saying that's actually where we actually can agree from a socialist perspective and from a capitalist perspective. From a socialist perspective is so that people can sort out their own welfare because government is unable to sort out the welfare. So that's from a socialist perspective. From a capitalist perspective, I'm just saying, well, then these people can actually earn. And that's my...
Thank you for that. All right, the minister's not here. I'm sure he would have sort of given an answer, a question back, I think. Ambassador, would you like just a quick minute just for your final thoughts, please?
Thank you very much. I think this has been a most enlightening, panel. What I would like to emphasize at this stage is, from Turkey's perspective, we are ready to cooperate, enhance our relations as equal partners. Our bilateral trade reflects that. We are almost half off with import-export, which we saw a 30% increase from 2023 to 2020, from 2022 to 2023. And taking up from Honorable Minister Muvira's remarks, I would like to emphasize we are partners. We would like to be partners in prosperity, and we pursue mutually beneficial outcomes. Turkey's foreign trade is more than $600 billion US. There is way to go for that to tap into Zimbabwe, and then again bilaterally. I'd just like to thank you for all my fellow panelists and all the views and questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Please give the Ambassador a big round of applause. Benjamin, final words, sir.
Thank you, Andy. It's been a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Chris and Takuwa and everyone. Thank you, Deputy Minister, for the responses. I just want to emphasize that the United States government has been here since day one. In April of 1980, we were your partners. We were partners with the Zimbabwean people. One of the highlights of my 19 years as a diplomat has been working with the private sector, trying to build trade rather than aid, and that's what we're here to do. We'd like to engage with everyone in this room on the problems that are on page 32 and look at the potential solutions that are on page 33 and see what we can do together. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Of course.
Thank you so much. I think maybe I'm just tempted to respond to Tinashe quickly and to say I'm very happy to engage in a debate about the need to formalize or not to formalize. I disagree with his notion of formalization. And to the ambassador of Turkey to offer her our country risk guarantee program. We developed a country risk guarantee which effectively insulates businessmen from political risk in our member countries. So if she wants to do more business here in Zimbabwe, we'll be willing to provide that country risk guarantees so that the businessmen from Turkey can just focus on the commercial side of the business and transfer the political risk to ourselves. And my final thoughts, I think one is to emphasize the need to mainstream this report. I love the report, I must be very honest. Government needs to take it very seriously. Last year, I think, from what I read, 25% perception that things were implemented, the recommendations were implemented. It's quite low. Government should try to increase that to 50%. And if there are areas where they disagree with the findings, they should proactively engage the business community to see whether there are misalignments in that sense. Then to encourage the businesses that in spite of all that, I'm a Nigerian and our economy is not particularly different, to be honest. Both from a currency perspective, from power situation, etc. But the business people in Nigeria have found a way to do their business irrespective of the expectations from the public sector. So if you are about to set up a new business, the cost of self-generating energy is the necessary part of the cost of setting up a business. So they need to look at how to manage the challenges that are identified in this report proactively without having to wait for government to fix everything. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, ZCC. Maybe since Afri mentioned political risk to the Turkish ambassador, interesting fact, you know, at the advent of 2017, 2018, in the London capital markets, our political and expropriation risk insurance premiums were around 5%. Right now, they're down to 1%. You know, the ZCC Business Confidence Index seems to be showing a dip in confidence, while the London capital markets are having an increase in confidence in the business environment. Let's echo some of the words that the professor said, that, you know, sometimes negativity attracts attention. In the discourse of trying to build and grow an economy, we need to make sure that there is no government here, there is no private sector here, but we come together. And that's the reason why I like engaging with Tinashe and his crew, because to me they represent the private sector. You know, when Tinashe mentions that 90% of the credit market is government, you know, that's 90% of trying to manage scarcity. Because Andy's talking about 1.1 billion in just cars and tires, right? These are not government cars or tires. These are Zimbabweans buying cars and tires. 1.1 billion. It means that there is no company that's offering 3-year terms to purchase that same vehicle, which means that we could have spent 300 billion as individuals just to buy that and spread it out over the years and use the other billion for something else. These capital markets will be created by us as Zimbabweans. Where as government, where as the Ministry of Finance, we are lacking in policy, for example. You know, we've tried as much as possible through the front door to create an open door policy so that we discuss some of these issues. If it's an issue of value preservation and credit creation, why do we not have institutions giving credit to buy vehicles if it's $1 billion per year industry? You know, these are questions that you should not be asking government, but then I should be asking the private sector, because these are your figures. So we need to have a discourse where government and private sector are actually communicating and coming up with policy that allows the private sector to make money, because this is just money that is lying in people's, well, it's being driven around. I don't want to pay for my car up front, and I have to because that's the environment. I'd rather block that and build a shopping mall, sell them, but you know, we can't. But that's not the role of government, that's the role of the private sector. So let's try to work in concert. Where government policy is ailing, I think through platforms like this, let's outline what those issues are, and we will try our best as government, you know, to make sure we address those. And I think those would be my parting points, Andy. Thank you.
Please, a big round of applause. Communication, consultation, working together is the only way forward for Zimbabwe, I believe. And all of you keep being resilient and keep doing 2025. Let's give a big round of applause to our panelists. Honorable Deputy Minister of Finance and Economic Development, Benjamin L. Pierce, of course, from the US Embassy in the Political Economic Council, Mr. Humphrey Wugo, hope I pronounced that right, Benson Bank Zimbabwe Regional Chief Operating Officer, Ambassador Werner Kasnaki Versteden, Turkey Ambassador to Zimbabwe, and Tinashe Murapata, CEO of Leon Capital. Please, a big round of applause for them. Well, that's it for me. I hope I've done my job. I'm Andy Hodges. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, and all of you, please stay safe. Bye.
Thank you, and a big round of applause for Andy. Let me just invite the secretariat, the cabinet crew, to come and give our panelists some goodies, some presents. Ladies and gentlemen, I know we are running late and lunch is ready, but we've got one session, and I just want you to tell somebody next to you to put on seatbelts. As we prepare for this final session, ladies and gentlemen, just tell, you see, we'll do it like this, we'll do it in exchange. Tell your neighbor to fasten on seatbelts, because we're about to enter into some turbulence. Secretary, please. We also want to invite Dr. Master before you go. The Deputy Governor, before you go, please. Also, and Mr. James Chimwaza, if you may just come and accept a token of appreciation from the ZNCC team. And somebody come and receive for the Minister Lovo, and also for Minister Mubira, then Mr. James Chimwaza. Maybe let's invite the President to come and, okay. The Deputy President is going to do the honors to make the presentations to our dignitaries. So for Mr. Chimwaza. Also for Honorable Koda Nangabo. Please move forward because the photos are part of our heritage.
When it's tax season, we review our taxes, ZNCC was there. They might not understand. It's a 5-piece barbecue set.
Yeah, thank you.
It's not enough to make me that.
Thank you. And also H.E. Banner, Ambassador.
also from his international party. Honorable Minister, you will also, while the minister is coming, may I also invite Zimdev to just to come, the minister. No, photos are empty. Please. A big round of applause for our panelists, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. Thank you. Can somebody come and receive for I think you can also have a photo taken as Honorable Mubira, and you'll be talking today about all those things that he was talking about. Ladies and gentlemen, Zimdev is one of our big partners or sponsors for this conference. Let's put our hands together for Zimdev as they are coming. But while Zimdev is coming, let me invite the final panel. Will not take long, ladies and gentlemen. The final panelists, ladies and gentlemen, Linda is our moderator, Linda Murilo. But let's invite Ambassador Christopher Mchambo to come and take up the seat up front. Engineer Dr. Gloria Magombo, Permanent Secretary, Minister of Energy and Power Development. Mr. Mike Kamangeremu, immediate past President of ZNCC, to also come and take a seat up front. Mr. Alex Warren Rodriguez, Senior Economist, UNDP, Zimbabwe, please also come and occupy the seat up front. Honorable Tendai BT, constitutional lawyer, please come and occupy the seat up front. Mrs. Wadanai Piri, CEO Coronation Solution, and Mr. Tawana Nyambirai to come and occupy the seat up front. While he's doing that, may I hand over to Zimdev. Let's put our hands together for Zimdev.
Section 33 of the Manpower Planning and Development Act of 1984, which has since been revised and is now referred to as the Manpower Planning and Development Act, Chapter 28.02. Zimdev is mandated to fund the development of critical and highly skilled human capital and innovation in Zimbabwe. It is a state enterprise under the Ministry of Education, Innovation, Science and Technology Development.
Zimdev's vision is to be a resource mobilization hub for human capital development and innovation for an industrialized and modernized economy by 2030. Zimdev's key focus areas are to do with the funding of human capital development and innovation in Zimbabwe. These are the funding of 1. New knowledge creation. 2. Research. 3. Innovation. 4. Science, technological and engineering solutions. 5. Business enterprise.
The funds collected by Zimdev are channeled toward the promotion of skilled manpower in Zimbabwe. This is done through the support of apprenticeship training, the disbursement of industrial attachment allowance for students at polytechnic colleges, and also the funding of various innovation projects that are spearheaded by the Ministry of Higher Tertiary Education, Innovation, Science and Technology.
A very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much for this opportunity. I think from the onset, allow me to thank the ZNCC for giving us this platform. We do have a long-standing partnership that we value, and we always cherish when they give us an opportunity to interact with their constituency, who are also our most important stakeholders at Zimdev. I think as was indicated in the video that was just played, Zimdev, the Zimbabwe Manpower Development Fund, is a state enterprise operating under the Ministry of Higher and Tertiary Education, and the broad objective is to mobilize resources for human skills development in Zimbabwe. So therefore, we are bridging the gap between the supply and demand of skilled professionals in Zimbabwe. And just to say that the fund, the main contributions for the fund come from employers who are obliged to contribute monthly to the fund 1% of their wage bill. 1% of the gross wage of all employers should be remitted to the fund monthly. So I just want to take this opportunity to thank those members who have continuously complied with this obligation and therefore contributed to the fund, and to also encourage those who may have fallen behind a little bit or forgotten, but to just remind you that we value the contributions. They're being put to good use as we are developing skills in Zimbabwe through funding various projects at state universities. We are also funding apprentices in Zimbabwe, and we're also providing allowances to students on attachment from polytechnics. So all of this is possible because of the contributions from industry, and we encourage you to continue contributing so that we continue to meet the overall objectives and the national objectives that have been set by the government and His Excellency the President. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madam. Good afternoon. I'm Linda Mulilo, the moderator for the session. I had hoped that at the last session I was going to stick to the 1 hour time frame, given that I'm moderating politicians, and believe you me, it's not an easy task, but it's my pleasure to stand before you. I will start with Ambassador Mchangwa as the spokesperson of the ruling ZANU-PF party. An issue of concern that has been raised by economists and critics is around the issue of policy consistency or lack thereof. Conflicting statements by government and the ruling party itself. And a major issue at the moment is around the lack of clarity around whether the current government will go beyond its tenure in 2028 or go beyond that. Why is there lack of clarity that some feel may scare investors and cause economic instability?
Hello. This issue is very topical, but I want to add some clarity to it. The Constitution of Zimbabwe is very clear. The president has 2 terms and he goes to 28. And the president has said, I wrote that Constitution. I am the one who put those clauses in that Constitution. And come 2028, I leave office. On the ZANU side, as the liberation movement, we hold a singular record of being the first ever national liberation movement who did not come into power, bullet to office. We downed guns in 1979, allowed the population of Zimbabwe to go and vote, and baptized our military victory by a ballot in 1980. So, democratic ethos is in our DNA as a party of people who voluntarily sacrificed to be where we are today. So, if there is a choice of succession, the choice is thrust upon the people of Zimbabwe and their constitution. And that's what the president is saying. We just came out of an election a year ago. All of a sudden, people want to talk about succession in ZANU-PF. But worse, they actually want the succession of a person or persons who get anointed to get that post. First is against the democratic ethos of ZANU-PF. You get elected to be where you are because it is a party which grew up on the basis of voluntary sacrifice by the Zimbabwe people. Those who are pushing for a succession soon after an election, when a president has got 5 years, are the ones who have got a problem. And it is their problem. We in ZANU-PF don't have that problem. And if there are some people in ZANU-PF who have that problem, then they are backing against the trend of the party. So in short, the president will have his 2 terms come 2028, there will be a Congress of ZANU-PF to decide who becomes the next candidate. The president is precluded from having a second term unless the people of Zimbabwe decide to accord him a second term. He has absolutely no role himself in that decision. It is a constitutional provision that goes to a referendum if that has to be a decision. So the decision is outside of the president. And lastly, I want to make one thing very clear. The current president, throughout the last 40 years, everybody who thinks the issue to decide for the people of Zimbabwe have been against him ascending to the post which he has today, the current president. By 2017, he makes it to the top, the current president. When he makes it to the top, everybody else who thinks he should decide for the people of Zimbabwe wants somehow to drive him out of office. That's why he slept with sanctions by those who think they run the world himself. Now, that current president survived to be where he is today, and along the way he has done things which this country has never seen before in terms of economic development. I'll tell you.
All right, thank you very much, Ambassador. We'll get into.
I just want to end on that. So, based on his performance of his record of performance, it is happy within the party that he continues as the leader of the party until the time the party doesn't want him. So you live with that because we take our decisions to the electorate, and what the electorate decides is what some people will do, I think.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Mutamba, for setting the record straight. Advocate BT, your reflections around a government's arrears clearance plan. We had recently the High Dialogue Platform, and I'm asking this in the context of submissions you made during your tenure as Finance Minister that Zimbabwe should get forgiveness under the highly indebted poor countries forum. What are your reflections around the plans being implemented by government?
Well, thank you very much. Let me thank the leadership of ZNCC for inviting me here. And I've just learned that the Minister of Trade had a role in ensuring that I was here, so I'm very grateful to him. I think it's important that Zimbabwe resolves the issue of its unsustainable debt level. Our current debt officially stands at around $22 billion US. But some would argue that it goes as high as $40 billion. It's important that we find a solution in respect of the amounts that we owe to the IFIs. We owe about $5 billion US to the Paris Club of lenders. We owe about $2 billion to the World Bank. We owe about $600 million US to the African Development Bank. There is some openness with regards to the total amount that we owe to China. There is some opaqueness with regards to the amount that we owe to the African Import and Export Bank. And I would have wanted to ask Humphrey, who was here, why they keep on lending money to the Zimbabwean government, which money doesn't go through the approval process provided for by our constitution, which demands that any external debt must be approved and ratified by Parliament. The African Import-Export Bank that doesn't do that. The issue of debt is not about the obligation to settle. Zimbabwe defaulted on its debt way back in 1999. The amounts we owe in the global context are very small amounts. It's small change. The issue about debt is a development issue. We cannot finance our own development. We need huge amounts of infrastructure resources that you'll find in the Africa Development Bank, for instance, in the World Bank, for instance. Remember the original name of the World Bank
was actually the Bank of Reconstruction and Rebuild following the Second World War. So it's important that we deal with the issue of debt. But the solution to debt is not purely an economic solution. You can't decouple a debt resolution from politics. Zimbabwe doesn't have the capacity to repay 21 billion, to repay 42 billion US dollars. I would also argue that for a Minister of Finance of a small economy like Zimbabwe, to take 2 billion US dollars in a population where 79% are surviving on less than US $1.20 a day, with the extent of the other development in our country, it's actually irresponsible. I would rather take that 2 billion US dollars and build hospitals, build schools, and build roads and infrastructure, i.e. attend to the gross capital formation of our country. But how do you resolve this debt if you don't pay? There's a solution that came out from developed countries, known as some would call it the highly indebted poor countries program, HIPC. Our government has been trying to do that for a long time. This program simply says that if you can demonstrate that you can manage your economy well, and I don't think that any finance minister needs the World Bank or the IMF to tell him that inflation is bad, low interest rates are bad, corruption is bad, wasteful consumptive expenditure is bad, failing to live within one's means, i.e. lack of fiscal consolidation is bad. So if you can follow that track record, they will give you a debt forgiveness. That's why they ask you to go through an upper tier SMP, an upper tier staff monitored program with the quantitative and qualitative targets that you have to meet. So that's round one. Round two, you have to deal with governance issues. You have to deal with political issues. Are you able to run a free and fair election? Do you have a clean record on the rule of law and human rights? Now, if you have a terrible record on elections, if people like Job Scala can spend 2 years in prison, then you have a problem. So, in short, the problem that Zimbabwe is facing with its debt agenda is not so much the management of the economy, but rather the political hygiene. We have to deal with our political hygiene, the issues of rule of law, the issues of clean legislation that is consistent with the constitution. So the international community, the African community, will frown on legislation such as the Patriot Bill, will frown on legislation such as the Private Voluntary Organization Bill, will frown on attempts to assault and emasculate the constitution by removing the term limits that are provided for in section 327 of the Constitution. So as far as I'm concerned, we need to deal with our politics, we need to deal with our rule of law record that is putting a premium on this country.
All right, so I will bounce off some questions to the panelists, and do get ready with your questions as we'll soon be getting into a Q&A. Now, Mr. Kamungeremo, when you were elected as ZNCC president in 2022, you did say that you wanted to push for private sector economic growth and engage policymakers. Just to reflect, to what extent did you achieve that? And how far is government going in ensuring private sector-led growth?
Thank you very much, Linda. By the way, you indicated that you're moderating politicians. I'm not a politician.
Yes, you're not.
And to also add, I sat in between these two gentlemen on purpose.
Thank you for that, Mr. Kamungeremo.
What we've come to learn, particularly from previous panels, is that the panel is degenerating into a meeting tower bilateral affair. So as business, we always want to come in between, because what we want to do is what best serves the country and the population. In fact, in 2018, when the director of ceremonies of today, Mr. Macheka, was our president. We visited a certain embassy, and the ambassador there advised us that, look, you are business, and your voice must be heard. Why can't you bring together the main political parties and get them to talk to each other? Because at the end of the day, what you need is a conducive environment for business. After that, we discussed amongst ourselves, and then we went to consult our elders, because we also have a council of elders, and the advice that we got there was for us to just leave it and concentrate on business. The point that I'm trying to drive home is that for us as a country to move forward, what we need at some point is tolerance, where both parties are actually pulling in the same direction. I think we saw a bit of that during 2013, which brought out the Constitution. I'm commenting mainly because of where we are going, because I saw my brother here itching. Back to your question, ZNCC is the voice of business, and I should admit that the government has always been receptive. I think the reason why we have got the ministers here, and they have been here since morning, listening and also taking part, is because they listen to business. You realize that when we started this survey 4 years ago, I can tell you it was not that easy, because some people felt we were not supposed to do that. How can you have a survey with such a result? How will the minister receive it? That is how people took it there. But we proceeded. Right now it has become an important document for policy making. And you can see from the findings, the ministers have gone through that. And indeed they are listening. Still on that, Linda, there are also some questions which have been asked, mostly from our ministers. When we were in briefing, Professor Mubira asked us, who is stopping the private sector from setting up power plants, for example? He asked us there, we could not respond to that. And I want to respond to that now. I hope the message will get to him. He can open the survey on page 28. There are so many IPPs that are currently licensed, and they've got issues that they've put forward. So they are there. Once that is resolved, they are willing to invest more. And then Honorable Love asked our CEO a question where you were saying, how does low demand impact the ease of doing business? Honorable, you know that when you have a market for a product, business becomes very easy. So what the members were saying, because of low demand, some are finding it difficult to continue doing business. Some of the matters have already been highlighted. For example, the effect of the sugar tax on those that are manufacturing cordials. It's an example of how they are affected. The cost went up, demand went down, and then business became very difficult. So generally, government has been listening. If you go to the report, you see the extent to which recommendations have been implemented. I think everything is there in the report. I don't need to repeat anything because the information is very clear. Thank you.
I'll save the last for best, the only woman on the panel. But coming to you, Mr. Rodriguez, what in your view are some of the low-hanging initiatives that can be undertaken to bring relief to the masses? We've had the issue of the tax burden and all the challenges bedeviling the Zimbabwean economy, whilst government is working on major capital projects. Please pass the mic.
Thank you, Linda. First, let me start by recognizing and appreciating the presence here of the Honourable Minister of Industry and Trade and Honourable Deputy Minister of Finance, Economic Development and Investment Promotion, and then the senior leadership of ZNCC. UNDP is a partner of this report, and I also like to say that we really appreciate this partnership. Our work, not only in Zimbabwe but globally, is driven by an ambition to drive evidence-based, inclusive policy dialogue, policy formulation for sustainable development. And this very long sentence I've just said translates into this practical things that we're seeing here today. A report, evidence-based, very well done report, and a dialogue where we bring different actors around the table and have a discussion on issues which are important for Zimbabwe. So just like to recognize and appreciate and thank ZNCC and also the authors of the report for making this possible. I was doubting, hesitating whether to weigh in on the issue of informality, and I think I'll have a go. I've recently arrived in Zimbabwe, so I don't know much about the Zimbabwean economy, the Zimbabwean informal economy, but I've been working on informality for many, many years in Asia, in the Philippines, Vietnam, in the African continent, in Uganda, Mozambique, where I've just come from. And I think there's a number of myths around informality that it's important to break down and unpack to understand exactly what we talk about. And we make sure that we formulate the policies that address different aspects. And I think there's 3 or 4 which are important. One of them is informality is not a sector. It's not a homogeneous sector. There's many dimensions to informality. In fact, you have informality, the ILO will tell you, also includes formal businesses that hire informally workers, but the formal businesses, so they subcontract and procure from informal operators. You have then, you've got a natural concern, which is that people that go to the informal economy to escape the fiscals, to operate in parallel markets. They're very evident in Zimbabwe, in terms of operating in the parallel exchange rate market. But in addition to that, what you have is a very large number, especially in terms of people, maybe not in terms of contribution to GDP, but a very large number of informal operators, which include anything from subsistence farmers, street hawkers, people who have very basic livelihoods. They might know, in terms of value, the value they contribute to the economy is not that big, but in terms of numbers of people, it tends to be very large. And I think it's important to recognize that. And each of those groups require different interventions. Clearly, those who are escaping the fiscus need to be taxed and probably be penalized, or people who are operating in parallel markets. But for the most part, in terms of number of people, it's very humble people. A lot of the statistics on informality globally include subsistence farmers. So people who don't even have access to markets very often, who see cash once or twice a year in very small amounts. So that's one myth. I think it's also important to recognize that some of those people do pay taxes or do pay fees. People operating in markets and things like that, they pay local fees. A third thing that needs to be demystified, I think, is that I'm not sure if you take out the large informal operators, those who make millions and do not declare to the fiscus and should declare to the fiscus, you take out those, you find that it's people who earn very little money, and hence that the scope for taxation is quite limited. It's important that they contribute and that they pay taxes. I think it's a matter of principle as a part of the social contract. But let's not expect huge amounts of money coming in terms of taxation. And this might sound a bit controversial, but you might find that many of these people won't be formalized, especially the small informal operators. Formalization will happen in the next generation, or the third generation, their children. And therefore we need to find ways of maybe at least formalization in a way that many of us understand, as in having an office in the CBD or Borodale Drive. That won't happen. What you need to do is give them the instruments, including the legal instruments, and give them some element of access to finance and things like that. So we need to tailor our interventions to that reality. In terms of low-hanging fruit, so going back to the question, I think the low-hanging fruits have been said here. I think the issue of stabilizing efforts which are going into macroeconomic stabilization, and I think the figures that were presented by the Reserve Bank indicate that things are improving, are going in that direction. I think that will create a lot of confidence. I think issues of business environment, those are things that require, policy measures, regulatory measures. Those are the ones that will help the private sector, really thrive. I think maybe what we shouldn't lose sight is about the longer-term issues. And that's a bit the challenge sometimes, where immediate concerns are so important, the issue of stabilization is so important that we lose sight of longer-term considerations. I think those are the ones that we shouldn't lose sight of. And I'd like maybe to mention 3. One of them has been said here, energy. But we're talking about energy. It's interesting. I was looking at the report and the comments of people. People referring to outages, power cuts. And that's, of course, an important problem. I was looking at at some figures yesterday for South Africa, but estimates from the South African Reserve Bank for 2022 indicating that the cost of load shedding amounted to 3.2 percentage points of GDP in South Africa. 3.2 percentage points, that's a huge amount. So that's the risk of, or the cost of, in South Africa, Zimbabwe is a different country, but it's a reference. That's the cost of power cuts. And in addition to power cuts, we have an issue of accessibility. All those people who still don't have access to regular sources of energy. And I think that in Zimbabwe is still a challenge. I mean, I think we have around 50% of the population who have access to electricity, so that's, it's gone a big way. I was looking at figures, 20 years ago it was only 30%, so there has been a significant improvement. But you've got Kenya, for instance. Kenya coverage is 76%. So there is one area, I think, in terms of giving accessibility. And that's where you find the small people, the small business people outside Harare, Bulawayo, who don't have access to electricity. They don't suffer backups, they just don't have access to electricity. The second element, I think, education. We talk about industrialization. Industrialization is definitely the key to achieve the country's ambition to become an upper middle country by 2030. But if you ask me, from my experience, and I've done quite a bit of research on this topic, the best industrial policy is education policy. We need to invest in education. You see that advanced economies are educated, highly educated economies, highly educated workforce, you know? And it makes sense. I mean, you want to become a highly upper middle income country, you need to produce, you need to move up the value chain, and that means producing more sophisticated products, and that means having a skilled workforce. You want to attract foreign investors and you want them to add local content, and you need to have local people who are able to work in those local content, highly value-added activities. So education is a must. I think things are, my opinion, personal opinion, from what I've seen, the human capital base for Zimbabwe is very solid. This is, I see it from a personal level, you know, in the international community, living abroad, Zimbabweans tend to be top. But just to say, just to mention two things, I think the creation of the Ministry of Skills Development, that's an important way forward, and I think also recognize the budget efforts which are being presented in the budget statement that was issued, I think, last week, with a budget allocation to education of 28% of the
budget. I have to bring in Madam Wazanai.
Thank you very much.
For so long. Thank you very much, Mr. Rodriguez. And Madam Wazanai, given the thrust that government is running with of engaging and re-engaging, not just on the regional and international forum, but even locally, where it's saying it's engaging local investors, the private sector. As a business leader, what advice would you give the Treasury boss if you were to have a one-on-one with the Minister of Finance or the mandatory authorities around steadying the economic ship and ushering economic prosperity?
Thank you, Linda. Like the president of ZNCC, I'm not a politician. I'm a management consultant. Not that there's anything wrong with anyone becoming a politician, but I'm just not one. In my space, we tend to work with financial services sector. We're talking banks, insurance companies. We also work with manufacturing companies to proffer solutions. We work with miners, exporters, quite a diversified clientele. The one thing that you hear business leaders talk about, I guess the government people are here, is that I think there's no trust between government, or there's reduced trust between government and private sector. I was just listening to the ministers, I was listening to private sector. You can see the strongness in how, you were talking, Honorable, and the way Honorable Murira was talking. I'm a Toastmaster. You know, you do what we call vocal variety. When someone is talking about something serious, you can see their face, you can even sense from their tone. I sensed a bit of defensiveness on the part of government, and I kind of sensed that thread quite a lot of times. Then flipping to the private sector, I also sense a bit of attack. It's almost you're attacking each other. And Honorable Wawira has mentioned that maybe we need to remove the barriers that says you're private, you're public, or you're government, and say, first and foremost, we are Zimbabweans, tisuvenilayo, so to speak. And for as long as that trust is not there, because I think a basis of a good relationship, whether it's a husband and a wife, it's friendship, it's an employer-employee, there must be trust. And my challenge to government, to the private sector, is we have to get to a point where we can trust each other and fight for the rebuilding of Zimbabwe and set aside our differences. If there's been any research that has been done and is pointing out to a fault, whether it's in government or it's in private sector, let's look at it objectively without worrying about who said it. Because sometimes it's almost like when something is said by private sector, it's wrong. Or if something is said by government, it's wrong. So that's number one, the thread that I hear across leaders saying there's no trust. The second issue that I hear is that they don't listen. So again, being a Toastmaster, I always say, how did you speak to the other party? It could be a question of the way we are speaking and talking to each other. Are we talking at each other, or we are discussing? And I think we need to mature as Zimbabweans and start talking to each other for rebuilding our nation. Talk is cheap unless we can follow with the actions. And so for me, those two things need to be addressed. Just watching as a consultant and hearing government, because I also work with state-owned enterprises as well as the private sector. But that discord, I think it's reached worrying levels where we can't speak positively about each other. I guess, not being a politician, I don't know what it entails to be a politician, but it's almost like we're attacking each other, left, right, and center, punching each other to see who punches, who gives the biggest punch. These are just my views. So that trust, communication, and having that Ubuntu and saying we are Zimbabweans first and foremost, we have to build our country. No one is going to build the country for us. And we have to then start by trusting each other, communicating each other, in whatever form it is, we have to find each other for the good of our country. Those are the two issues. But as far as the economy in 2024, quite an interesting picture as a consultant. You do have businesses that are thriving, even in this state of the economy. I was looking at the regulator of insurance, because I'm coming from an insurance background. We've seen premiums, almost insurance companies reporting around 90% of their premiums in US dollars with very little in our local currency. Testament to the fact that I think there's a lot of USD in the economy and people are wanting to make sure that they're covered. When you also look at the manufacturing, there's a bit of distress again when we're talking to them. They can't find cheap money. They are wanting structures. But as consultants, when we then go out and are trying to look for money, the questions that you get asked, you can't answer them sometimes. Confidence, they're saying the rule of law, they are asking whether they will get their money back. So that conversation ought to continue so that we can rebuild our country. Those will be my submissions, Linda. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So now, in the interest of time, we'll do just one round, and I'll ask the panelists to stick to exactly 2 minutes in giving their responses so that we can open the floor for questions. And now, coming back to you, Ambassador Mchangwa, as the ruling party, do you have sincere, no-holds-barred discussions around policy issues? And what do you think needs to be done to bring relief to the millions of supporters that ZANU-PF has? What does central government need to do to address some of the policy missteps and issues that are affecting the country? You've got 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. Well, I've been addressed as a politician. I want to make it very clear. I only moonlight as a politician. I am a businessman. And behind my credentials, which exactly is what is my relationship with the president, has been some of the biggest investment projects which have saved this country. You remember I was in China as ambassador in the Look East policy. Tobacco is big. That was me and the Kenyan president reforming the financing of agriculture to make it possible for 128,000 families every year to contribute $800 million to the fiscus every year since 2007 and grow. That is PF catering for the masses. In 2016, I went into cabinet. You will remember, all of you, that gold diggers were illegal. A decision was made to allow SME gold mining. Today, it's a $3 billion industry. There is no startup in Silicon Valley which has performed as Zimbabwe's SME gold sector. That's why we have the ZIP today. In 2012, I started working with the Kenyan president on the steel ecosystem of Zimbabwe. Together, we snared the biggest company in the world doing steel, Fortune 500, number 250. It's in Zimbabwe. It has started with chrome. It is now exporting $200 million of coke and coal from Mwange to South Africa to ArcelorMittal South Africa. Final step, it is at Manise. The steel plant at Manise, nothing in Europe compares to what we have in Europe. And this is an expert from the Germans who come from Dortmund, which is the home of Zimbabwe steel. Steel is to human beings what food is, and steel is to nations what food is to human beings. And Zimbabwe now is a world-class steel plant, and no country in the world should produce steel cheaper than Zimbabwe, because all the elements which make steel are within 400 kilometers of each other, better than China, which takes 12,000 kilometers from Brazil. The president has seen to it that we now have a steel ecosystem. Fasten your seat belts. That's a game changer on a scale unheard of in the world. And incidentally, what happened in Manise was built by young people who was talking for human skills. The Chinese only came to supervise. The world was done by Zimbabweans, young people, who should actually be merited with the awards.
All right.
The logistics chain, which is going to cater for the exports of steel to Mozambique, are going to create something like a $10 billion economy. We have a railway line which is going to from Manise to Bayer, and a new port at Manise at Bayer. 200,000 tons. This is important. Wait, this is important because you would ask for politics, but the president is not focused on politics. He is focused on fundamental sinews of this economy. Zimbabwe will be number one. South Africa is running under the threat of our steel plant. We're going places where somebody is talking about human rights and all the other which we're hearing earlier on. I thank you.
Thank you very much. You did 3 minutes, so it means I'll ask all the panelists in the spirit of fitness to do their 3 minutes. Advocate Biti, I know you'd like to respond to that, but before you do, you'll respond later. Could you please, in 3 minutes, strictly 3 minutes, comment on your repeated call to dollarize the economy, given that government and industry says it would make business uncompetitive, and the government saying that it would not be able to influence fiscal and monetary policy?
Well, I just want to say one thing about Manise. You know, the problem why Zimbabwe is not developed and why the whole of Africa is not developed is because of our accumulation model. It is extractive. We are still exporting raw material. We are not beneficiating. We are not industrialized. Humphrey was here. He said between Ghana, Nigeria, and Cote d'Ivoire, they control 60% of the cocoa production, but they control less than 2% of the chocolate industry because there is no value addition. So my brother Chris can't celebrate Manise that is going to build a deep sea port in Sofala, now known as Bayer, to export raw iron to Europe or to despised without beneficiation and in Zimbabwe.
Still is a beneficiated.
So they're going to construct a pipeline from Mamizi to Bayer that's going to take raw iron ore into the ocean, into Mamizi. So with this model, if you wake up Cecil John Ross today, if you wake up Cecil John Ross today, if you wake up Cecil John Ross today, you will get lost because the accumulation model is still extraction.
The question that I asked will allow Ambassador Muchara to respond to the issues that you've raised as you gentlemen give your counter remarks. But I really would like us to respect the floor and allow them to ask you questions as they have sat patiently so that they can engage with you. So could you please respond to the question and let's allow the audience. Thank you.
Yeah, so what happened in 2008 was that Zimbabweans, ordinary Zimbabweans, lost trust and faith in their own currency. It was not the decision or the wisdom of government that forced the Zimbabwean government to dollarize its currency in 2009. It was the collapse of confidence in a currency. And Zimbabweans have gone through at least 6 episodes of violation by its own currency. Up to 2008, we lost pensions of $5.68 billion as a result of our currency collapse, the introduction of the bearer check, for instance. And you remember, Chair, that by 2008, we were printing, the Reserve Bank was printing $100 trillion note, which could buy you 2 bottles of soda. Then people rebuilt their lives, their assets. By the end of the GNU, we had $6.5 billion of broad money in our economy. But on the 4th of May, in 2014, the Reserve Bank introduced a creature called the bond note. And so all the savings, all the rebuilding that people had done collapsed. The worst was 20th February 2019. On 20 February 2019, the Minister of Finance enacted Statute Instrument 33 of 2019, which introduced the RTGS dollar and said the RTGS dollar was which was a fiction. Again, millions and millions of dollars were lost through that process. So it's because of the violation and the abuse that Zimbabwean people have suffered at the hands of their own currencies that they have no trust. So dollarization is simply a way of shielding, of the citizen shielding himself against the abuses, the omissions and commissions of the state, of government. And if you look at, just to conclude, a citizen who protects himself, who take himself out of the realms of a government that is failing to deliver. Most of the people here have boreholes because there's no water in Zimbabwe. Most of the people here have got solar panels because there's no energy in Zimbabwe. So the US dollar or the foreign currency represents a safety self-defense mechanisms against the shenanigans of a government that has failed to manage its own currency.
The point has been taken, and thank you very much. Now gives her final response, the final question. You can prepare your questions. We'll just have one round of questions. Madam Wanzanai, policy missteps that need to be avoided as we move into 2025.
I think if we say we are doing something, let's stick to it. I think the issue of trust, I think constitutional lawyer Betty mentioned that if we don't build trust, in Shona we say, in fact in English we say once bitten, twice shy. I think people have lost value over time and continue to lose value. Certainly this year there was a loss of value when we were transitioning. stock market itself initially, yes, it's corrected somewhat. If we don't address that, we will have challenges into the future. So people will keep, trying to cushion themselves because you're being banned, so you have to correct yourself. So that will be my appeal to all stakeholders, whether you're in government or in private sector. Let's have Zimbabwe at heart. We are first and foremost Zimbabweans, and we must strive to make things work for us. My question to each one of us participating is, what will our generation be remembered for? What will Ambassador Mchama be remembered for? What will Chris Ndaga be remembered for? And what was an IP be remembered for? And I think that should give us a lot of homework to say, when I served in government, when I served in private sector, when I served in the civil community, I played a part to build Zimbabwe. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Madam. And I will have one round of questions. Please be precise, straight to the point. We have already gone beyond our schedule. So if sure, by raise of hand, introduce yourself and mention who your question is directed to, and then we can conclude for the day. Questions? The Honorable Minister has a question.
I don't know if it will come out as a question, but let me thank the panelists for a very robust. That's what they told me. They said there will be a robust session. Maybe that's what they meant. Critical issues were discussed. I really want to thank Rodriguez for how he looks at the informal sector and how it would be helpful really to break it down and separate different categories. Sure, it's not the homogenization. It's well noted. To my elders here and brothers, there was an interesting presentation by Professor Murai this morning. I'm not too sure if they were here. That we can choose to be negative or we can choose to be hopeful. Being negative will attract a lot of attention, sure, but being hopeful can build a nation. 2 examples, maybe I'll give just one. Manise will be in its first production next year. And Ambassador Chris highlights some of the infrastructure that is coming. A realization by my brother BT is that we are likely to be exporting this in its raw form. My point is that as Zimbabweans want to build, this is an interesting discussion to say, how can we maximize our benefit out of this development that is coming in? And I might highlight, and I extend an invitation to both of you, 12, 13 December, we have the entire iron and steel industry in Kwekwe. We are coming up with an entire value chain. They will bring, I think, Manise will produce close to 600,000 tons next year. Our own absorption capacity does not go beyond 150 to 200,000. We can do a lot more around that to build our economy. I'm hoping the robustness as we go forward, we'll be looking at how these brilliant minds our country have can come together and build a stronger economy. I'm leaving, so I don't want them to respond to me, so I have to write something. But thank you so much for your capacity.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Any questions? Any other questions to ask the panelists? All right, maybe it's just fatigue. People are tired, I'm not sure. So I'll just then ask our panel to just give us their parting shots if there aren't any questions. I have so many questions, but again, it will take 2 more hours, so I'd rather not get into that. Because the question I would have loved to ask would be, there's been so much talk around what should come first, an export ban on raw minerals whilst we set up smelting plants, or vice versa. We first set up, given the challenges that we have in terms of financial constraints, but maybe you could touch on that as you give your parting remarks. Yes, Mr. Rodriguez, since you have the mic.
I'll just keep it very short. I'm mindful that we are the only thing between the end of this and lunch. So just to thank, first of all, ZNCC for organizing this very interesting, very vibrant, robust discussion that we've had. I'm very happy to be part of this process, and we commit to continue providing that support. And then thank all the participants for staying here and for interacting with us. Thank you very much.
All right. Before Ambassador Mchangwa responds, I'll ask Madam Wadzanai to respond for obvious reasons, so that he'll respond at once, because I know he may want to then also respond to another response.
I think thank you, ZNCC, for the opportunity. I think Zimbabweans, we've been resilient. Let's continue to be resilient and work towards building our country. It's not an easy terrain, and I think there's a lot of lessons that we drew from different speakers today. But I think let's all strive to leave a legacy beyond us. Thank you.
Mr. Kangeren.
Thank you very much. On the question of what comes first, I would like to refer to the Egyptian example, not specifically related to minerals, but to imports in general, because we may need to do that as a country. I think we were together with my brother, James Chimwaza. We were invited by the Egyptian government in 2022 to say, come. I think we were 33 of us, presidents of chambers of commerce. They were saying, come, we want you to see the kind of capacity that we have built. We know you are importing a lot from Europe. Please import from us, your brothers. They took time to build capacity. And they took us through the journey that they traveled. So they were even definite in terms of time frames. For example, we were told that the first program, they gave industries 6 months to organize themselves and make sure that certain listed products which were being consumed in government departments in the country were actually manufactured locally. When the 6 months lapsed, they actually banned them. And there were actually acute shortages after that. And what then followed was actually the birth of new industries. Because those that used to supply were forced to partner locals who were distributors. And they brought in equipment and started manufacturing in-house. It's an example of that. But as I conclude, there's the issue of energy, which was discussed earlier. I don't want to go into details on it, but I find myself in that particular industry. In my appeal to fellow business people that are here, an organized chief executive officer must actually have a plan for now to solve their power issues. And this is what we do every day. I know most people know me for ZNCC. I'm with 10. We provide power solutions, not just the solar, because what you need is the right energy mix. But we actually provide the hybrid for you. It's part of business continuity, so that at least we save the remaining industries that are there. That's why I'm highlighting this point. So that note, let's get in touch, let's do business. Thank you very much.
I want to weigh in and take advantage of the presence of Deputy Minister Mnangagwa. I want to say that the informal sector in Zimbabwe is too big. This report puts it at 67%. Informalization is never achieved by taxation. Formalization is actually achieved by capitalization of those small players. They need cheap money, but the problem is they don't have security. They don't have a track record that can persuade a bank like Stanbic or CPZ to actually lend them. But a government intervention can actually help. That's why many years ago we created a set of the Small Enterprises Development Corporation. And for a long time, Minister Stevenson did a lot of work in ensuring access to capital. The other thing about formalization is, of course, registration. Hernando de Soto, a Chilean economist, has written this fantastic book called The Mystery of Capital, in which he explores the formalization through registration. But I think the one thing that government can do is over-reliance on indirect taxes and taxing the skin out of the informal trade. Regrettably, I think that's what you guys, with respect, have been doing. You can tax pizza. Who eats pizza? It's the man in iPhone, ordinary Africa. You can tax betting income. Who goes and places a bet on Chelsea versus Southampton? It's my small brother in Kwatsana who is unemployed. So if you have a government which is obsessed with the taxation, the net result is deindustrialization. And we have seen massive deindustrialization in this country in the past few days. Big companies have left. I was reading the other day that Chopis is left in Zimbabwe. Banks, Standard Chartered Bank is left Zimbabwe. Barclays Bank left Zimbabwe a few years ago. So these harsh taxation regimes have the net effect of industrializing our country and contributing to capital flight. I would suggest that you have empathy with the ordinary citizens. You said and pleaded that you come from a socialist party which believes in brutal regimes. Your budget is not reflective of that. It lacks empathy. It's so cruel, when you have to take pizza and things like that. So I hope you can take my message forward. Thank you.
Hello, thank you very much. First, I would like to go to Chemistry 101. Chemistry 101 says steel is a beneficiated product. And all the countries which have made it in the world, they are admired for their steel industry. That's why you see all those cars outside. That's why you see all this building. To have a president who brings the largest steel plant to the rich resources of Zimbabwe. We have enough iron ore for 200 years. We have the best coking coal in Africa. We have the largest chrome reserves, high quality, in the world. To bring capital of the scale and scope of a Fortune 500 number 239 company to build a steel plant which even no European country has had, it is a master stroke in the development of this country. And with due modesty, to take it to Brazil, I can assure you in the next 5 to 10 years, we will be in the league of the top steel producers, among them in the whole world. This is what President Mnangagwa is taking us to. And with it comes the infrastructure, which requires the export of steel products. We only consume 2 to 3% of that steel. A lot of it will be processed in this country. As I talk, you know we are building sheds in Bali. I am talking to the German steel industry. I'm talking to the Chinese steel industry. I'm talking to the Japanese steel industry. We are going to develop a world-class steel fabrication sector at CSO in Bali in the next 24 to 36 months, if not less. This is, I'm doing it, I know what I'm doing. I'm not talking about moon from the stars. So if you want to be rich and you want to be successful business people, not pet traders, you position yourself to the way the country is going with steel. We are going to build a town of 150,000 people at Mandise in the next 18 to 24 to 36 months. This is the scale of what is going on there. Already, I've seen South Africa is quaking under its feet about what's happening in Zimbabwe. These are world-class players who are knowing what Zimbabwe is going. If you can't set your mind to that, and you continue to hear all these despondent stories, you will be bypassed by the train of becoming a billionaire in the next 5 to 10 years. Don't listen to the gentleman on my left. Follow President Mnangagwa and be rich. That's it.
Thank you very much. I'm sure the panel has done extremely well in ensuring that all the issues were covered within an hour compared to the previous panel. Please put your hands together for this panel. Ambassador Christopher Mchangwa, Mr. Mike Kamgeremu, immediate past president of ZNCC, Mr. Alex Warren Rodriguez, senior economist, UNDP Zimbabwe, Honorable Tendai Biti, constitutional lawyer and retired politician, as well as Mrs. Wazanai Piri, CEO of Correlation Solutions Private Limited. We had hoped to be joined by Secretary of Energy and Power Development, Dr. Gloria Makombo. I'm sure she would have spoken authoritatively around the issues of energy and power supply, which have been center stage at this forum. I'll ask my panelists to take their seats. Oh, no. So please put your hands together for the one.
Thank you, Linda. Let's put our hands together for Linda. At this point, let me invite our secretariats to just come and get over some presents to our panelists. While they're doing that, please can you play us First Capital commercial. Ladies and gentlemen, at this point, while they're preparing, I want to tell Mr. Kamgerem something real. Mr. Kamgerem, in 2080, cheap. For the sake, some of us will not be there. It will be cheap. Thank you. Okay. In terms of our presentation, we start with Ambassador Chris Muchangwa. Please, if you can get the president to come and help us. And we believe photos are our heritage. Let's put our hands together for Ambassador Muchangwa. So please take time to talk to him. He said, hey, I know what I am doing. Honorable Tendai Biti. And Mrs. Watanai Piri. Mr. Alex Rodriguez. And Mr. Mike Kamgerem. Maybe they can just stand for a group photo. And stand for a group photo. I think it will be interesting for now, Mr. Kamgerem, you've done your part. So you see, the gentleman on the right and the gentleman on the left are together. I think they are planning when to visit Manise. Thank you very much, panelists. Please take your seats. Thank you very much. While we are playing the commercial for First Capital, may I invite the Deputy President, Mr. Josephine Takunda, to come up.
So, the commissioning is an opportunity for us to tell the rest of the world, as well as private sector, to come and see the opportunities attached to this particular facility that Aquacha is currently hosting.
What an afternoon. I'm sure we all agree we had very vibrant and energizing discussions today. and I'm sure we'll spread the word that the ZNCC is where things happen. In absentia, Honorable Mangaliso, Minister of Industry and Commerce, Honorable Dr. Mugwera, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Trade, Deputy Minister of Finance and Economic Development, Ambassadors here present, the Chairman of COMESA, Mr. James Chimwaza, members of the Diplomatic Corps. As we close this insightful conference, themed Unlocking New Frontiers for Sustainable Industrialization and Climate-Smart Growth, I stand before you inspired by the discussions held today, which showed a commitment to shaping Zimbabwe's industrial and economic future. From our deliberations on monetary and fiscal developments to the state of industry in Zimbabwe, it was clear that continued collaboration between government and the private sector is paramount to overcoming challenges and seizing emerging opportunities. Every challenge presents an opportunity. We should therefore look at both sides of any scenario that stretches us and capitalize on the positive aspects thereof. We explored strategies with Minister Mugwera to increase foreign currency inflows, and he challenged us to have a mental chimurenga, a mindset revolution that should see us looking for the positives in whatever situations that we find ourselves in. Honorable Glovo challenge us not to be a source of raw materials for other nations, a backyard, so to speak, where they go and pluck and the value add and then sell to us. The conversations that we had today have reinforced that sustainable economic growth is not a choice but a necessity, one that demands resilience and meaningful partnerships with enablers such as the government. Let me mention that government has always maintained an open door policy to private sector. We have a healthy and meaningful relationship. Where we differ, we agree to differ. Where we agree, we will agree. At this point, on behalf of the ZNCC, I would like to extend my deepest gratitude to the honorable ministers who attended the event today, and also to our distinguished panelists for their invaluable insights. Your expertise has enriched our understanding and will inspire new ways of thinking. I would like to thank our long-time and all-weather partners, Fred Nomen and the UNDP, for their support in making the survey presented today possible. And I thank our sponsors for the event, the First Capital Bank, Delta Corporation, Coronation Solutions, and ZFN. I also thank another set of sponsors who sponsored the production of the survey report. Tendo Electronics, SmartVest Wealth Management, Earthlink Technologies, and STF Capital. I also would like to thank our media partners who are here today covering the event. And lastly, by no means the least, I'd like to thank our facilitators today, Andy and Linda. What a great job you have done today. And finally, the captain of the flight. It threatened to be a bit bumpy and turbulent towards the end, but I'm glad that it landed safely. I'd like to thank our PP, Mr. Macheka, for
Thank you so much. So at this juncture, okay, a round of applause for our panelists. At this point, I'd like to thank you all, the attendees. Without you, this conference would not have been possible. So thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. And I'd like to wish you all a pleasant afternoon further.
A big round of applause for our Deputy President, Mr. Josephine Kumba. Ladies and gentlemen, at this point, we have come to the end of our conference. What's left for me is just to wish you a Merry Christmas and a prosperous 2025. Prophetically, I can see that things are going to be okay in 2025. Things are bright in 2025. So may you please eat responsibly. SDG what? Even as we proceed to the restaurant, responsible consumption and responsible production. They've already produced it responsibly, but consume it responsibly by taking what you can finish. If you take whatever you take, make sure you finish. That's being responsible. And at this stage, I just want us to honor two people who are in our midst, who are going to live first, even as we celebrate as they are going. Ambassador Muchangwa and Honorable Biti, please lead us to the restaurant. That's where Manisa is. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.